I am really glad to see all of you here, especially this year. This is very monumentous. Things are happening. Lots of us have questions and thoughts and views for the future. So this is where we're going to hash some of that out. Do you want to say anything about?
Yeah, I mean, I would just highlight, we are recording. If I take any pictures and you don't want them to go on social, do absolutely tell me. Just things like that. But also, one of the key things for us for this event is we don't have all the answers. We've obviously kind of had announcements and laid things out, but this is the key event to kind of get that feedback, and for us to kind of work together on bringing back things that would make it work better.
And we're going to start kind of like light and low key, because I mean it is morning, like we're still all waking up, so we're not going to jump directly into the heavy stuff yet. I'll start out by saying that this guy back there, tall dude, and Lucas, that's how you go back there. They're both available to help people if anybody's looking for help with Puppet 8 upgrades. We've got a slot here. It's like if you want help, you want advice, you have questions or anything about it, just grab them and just like sit down and get your questions answered. Any questions about those questions?
Because I appreciate we've obviously had there was at least 3 presentations that covered Puppet 8 upgrades. So
is anybody offering to help upgrade me from 3 and 4 to 8? Because I would love to not do that anymore.
So one of my very first engagements was upgrading from helping a client upgrade from 3 to 4, and you know what that involved? Like 8 hours of searching and replacing hyphens. Not even kidding.
I believe it.
The thing is, because you can't just do a grep or something, because it depends on the context of where it is. So it was a lot of find next. Yeah, no, we got to fix that one. Yeah. So no, that one is absolutely miserable. Yeah, thanks. That one was absolutely miserable, and that one's just good luck. Have fun. Yeah. Use catalog diff. Run it. If you have the variables that are broken, it'll explode. Catalog diff will tell you. That's the quickest way.
That's one thing I actually need to get set up that we don't have. Yeah, we're getting there. It's just a slog.
I think that's why every sort of Puppet upgrade story starts from 5, because it's everything before that's so fiddly. And I remember it painfully.
I remember doing it the first time.
Yeah.
Sadly, I'm stupid and I signed up to do it a second time. But
only twice? I've got 3.
Okay, the second time is you have forgotten. The third time is you're just seeking pain.
or somebody was like, no, you have to do it anyways.
No, fair enough.
All right, the next thing that we're going to do is, maybe this is a good spot right here. If you've been to these community days before, you know that lightning talks are a core part of what we do. I'm just going to put a list up here, and if you right now or later on during the day, if you have something you're like, oh, sure, I want to talk about that. I want to do a quick presentation. Even if you don't have a deck, even if it's just you want to stand up here and say words, whatever it is, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, maybe up to 10 minutes. Just come up here, put your name, and we'll give you a call when we get time in the slot for that. So
you can throw mine up there, Ben.
Okay. What are you going to talk about?
Puppet file.
Pile?
Puppet file.
Oh.
I mean, equally painful.
Cool. So just like that, if you have an idea of something you want to talk about, just kind of sneak up and go behind the person speaking and just write your name up there. Questions about that? Here's our first one, or second one. Okay. So agenda for the day, we've got some stuff. We're going to talk about the road to 9. David's going to do most of that there. Some of it is like some of the testing things that we've done, and I think Lucas was going to talk about that. I don't remember.
So obviously there's been some internal work in Perforce talking about Puppet 9. I asked, can I have a copy of that list so I can say that some of the things we were talking about? Obviously we absolutely want to hear what you were talking about as well.
And then We may or may not do this one because we had a change in, somebody got sick and Nick sort of just stepped in and said, yeah, sure, I can do a talk on, 30 minutes notice? Talked about the OpenVox test pipeline. We might skip that, or we might say, hey, instead of Nick telling you how it works, how about we have a little conversation and say, what do we still have to do? How can we extend? We don't have acceptance testing yet. How are we going to run that? How are we going to push gems up? Things like that. So that might turn into just an open floor conversation.
That would dovetail nicely with what I need to talk about later on infrastructure anyway.
Perfect.
Might do a 10-minute intro to it for the folks that were in the other, because that was when there were 2 rooms going.
Yeah. All right. That would be great. And then we've got a whole bunch of Vox stuff. Every year we do elections here. And then we also, because Vox is stepping up to take on an even more prominent role here, we'd like to talk about onboarding. So in the past, our onboarding has basically been Tim does a presentation everywhere he can and says, hey, come talk to us. But the actual process of getting involved with Vox takes a little bit of initiative, and you kind of have to feel your way in. You're like, what do you mean I just asked somebody if I can join the org? So we need to write up a little bit, maybe do some hey, here, this is how you find the issues, or this is how you can get involved with helping us with PR reviews or something.
A real getting started guide?
Yeah, exactly. Just a getting started guide. So I'd like to put a couple of minutes into that, talking about some ideas, and maybe get somebody who wants to volunteer to actually write the thing. That would be great. We'll do a couple of lightning talks, like I said, and then we get David's shit show. Sorry.
Well, I mean, to be honest, it's kind of a funny one because in some ways a lot of it's already been presented over the point, but I think it's a good time to kind of summarise it and also give that kind of time for questions and answers. And obviously, you've had the 2 days to think about things that I've said or things that have been questioned. I've obviously heard some things as well, which I can try and clarify on as well. But yeah, just having the time, and obviously in the same sort of way, if there's things that are absolutely immediate, we could maybe we could write them up as well, just as kind of these are the absolute blockers, because we heard what you say how it's going to work, but this is why it doesn't work right now.
And I think it also makes sense, maybe if some of the people involved in the creation of the fork are also available for questions if you want to ask us how we're going to work together, what we're going to be doing. So you can ask those kind of questions too. And honestly, this is not a community that holds back, but really, truly, honestly, that's what this is for. Let it all out. If there's something that you're feeling that you think that David needs to take back to Perforce, that's what he's here for.
The worst possible event for me is silence. If you hear everything I've said and you just go sure, then to be honest, we're fucked, right?
And to be clear, that would be all of us, not just Perforce.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to hear it. There's no, there's nothing silly or kind of anything. We just need to know what doesn't work for people, and we want to know how to make it work.
And your point is very, very true, very salient. This may be a fork in products, but it is not a fork in community. If we split up the community, if we fragment the community, we'll all sink. This is something that we're in here together. So don't feel like there's animosity here. This afternoon, we've got a couple of other things that we're going to do. We've talked about the steering committee. So the idea here is that, honestly, I think this is something we should have done a decade ago, but there's not really a good sort of shared specification. There's the language spec that I think Henrik wrote, and that's sitting off in a repo somewhere that nobody knows how to read or find or anything, but there's no governance around it. So what we'll want to do is put together a committee, and that's going to be people from Perforce, people from probably Betadots, from Vox, and talk about how do we decide what what is the next iteration of the Puppet language? What are features we need to have? What are features we need to deprecate? At what pace are we going to get rid of some of the old stuff that nobody wants or nobody should be using anymore? And then the security team, like a security response team for Vox, is one of the things that is going to be absolutely critical for us to get adoption into any enterprises. And also, like all the big companies like Mozilla, Apple, Google, they all like share information back channel so that they can all present a coordinated response. We need to work with Perforce so that we have coordinated responses to things that affect us both.
Responsible disclosure.
And just to clarify,
responsible disclosure.
Yes.
And just to clarify that our security team is committed to working with Vox, so that it does nobody any good if either side is having vulnerabilities, because it's a combined ecosystem.
And then that will, like, the afternoon will start off like we'll do those two things, and then we're going to split out. The Vox committee is going to head over to 11 because we have a whole bunch of stuff that that really is just us. How do we build our governance for the product or for the project? What kind of like technical steering do we need? And a lot of infrastructure questions. And so like that's we're going to get all of those things kind of hashed out. And meanwhile, David's going to run here some more lightning talks and like hack time. So if you have something you want to hack on, if you want to work with somebody, if you want to like heads down like brainstorm some stuff, there's going to be hack time in here. And one might ask if we could move that to a room with tables instead of these. If we do, we'll talk about that later.
I mean, otherwise, I guess we can form groups with the best.
Yeah, room mainly has tables.
What's that?
Room 11 has tables.
Yeah, we're going to need those for that though.
Group tables. Or
Well, I'm saying that as we split up, the breakout's going to need tables, but if they do workshops in here, they're going to probably want tables too. So sometimes we move over to the other wing to get that room over there. So with that, I think we're ready for talking about the road to 9. And you had some stuff you were going to do, and then we'll get out of the way.
I'm sure face locking seems really smart right until we have to duck down and leave the screen. He also seems to want me to smile most of the time. So this is in no way, I don't even know if it's actually worth showing on the screen because I just have a text file open here with a list of stuff I took out, but maybe so people can actually read. Remember to take my adapter out.
I have a dongle if you need it. Perfect.
No.
There's
There's a power button. Yep. It's on first. And it's also pretty old, so it takes a little bit to warm up. So.
Well, I'll tell you what, I won't keep everyone waiting for the excitement of seeing my screen with the text pad open. So what happened is Gavin Patton, who's one of our PMs, had been going around service engineers, professional services, various areas to basically get, from our point of view, what we kind of think was a start as we talk about Puppet 9. Because we just kind of wanted to get kind of a list of kind of what were the essentials and then what were the wanted. So I guess from our point of view, just highlighting there, getting to Ruby 3.4 was viewed as essential. Excuse my Ruby error in the first talk. OpenSSL upgrades and any kind of other essential updates in the dependencies. Actually removing legacy facts, which I think should get the biggest cheer. Talking about YAML-based Puppet files and YAML-based manifests to be easier to learn compared to Ruby.
Puppet files, yes. Manifests, please don't.
Was that?
Please
Yes.
don't do manifests.
I mean, it's already a thing in boat plans and YAML are already a thing.
I know. Please don't.
I should say, as I'm reading these through, this is not necessarily me saying I support all these either.
I think it's all these optional or mandatory to pick YAML in the future.
Well, that's not a decision made, but I would personally I would see it as optional. I don't, I think as Alessandro was discussing in terms of things that we want.
mainly the YAML as a code,
Was that?
manifest.
Yeah.
For me, the one that maybe
being Jan, right?
Can I use Ansible tasks?
Is that?
Can I use Ansible tasks in my Puppet manifest?
Well, that's something that's been talked about a lot. Is in terms of like, should we have a capability of, because it's not just Puppet as well. It is ultimately Bolt we're talking about.
I mean, to be fair, it was written and then shelved.
Yeah.
It exists.
Yeah.
Real quick question.
Yeah.
When I was talking to Josh, he was saying that they had a list of stuff, but there was like a brainstorm list. Like these weren't decided on.
Yes.
Is that correct? These are things that are like.
This
still in the
is
proposal
basically
phase.
the combined thought process of, this isn't us saying this is what Powerforce think we should do. This is like
So
is
it's
the
like,
combined
here's
things
some
of
suggestions.
what we
Let's talk about
suggested,
what we
and
wanna
we'll need to narrow this down because we're both going to have to be both sides are going to have to be realistic. What can we implement for Puppet 9? Because to be blunt in this room right now, Puppet 8 did not have solid themes.
do.
And that obviously makes it difficult for people going to their own business to justify upgrade. So that's the thing, as we kind of look through these suggestions and your suggestions and the wider community suggestions, we kind of want to try and establish some themes and then narrow it down to what's feasible for us to implement as well. Full stack support for IPv version 4 and 6. Enhancing no-op functionality. So if people are familiar with the TR-Link no-op module, that's used by quite a few of our customers, and it's one of those awkward modules that sat there not owned by anyone, not fully maintained, but well used. Finalising the resource API to replace types and providers.
Sorry, what does that no module do?
Basically, you can use it in such a way that you can.
So it's a function that basically switches no-op on for all the resources in current scope. So if you go into if you put it in a class and you just say
Yes.
no-op, everything inside that class gets no-op.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
and
it's
I
kind
mean,
of a way of commenting out a class or something like that.
yeah, no, absolutely, and it makes it much easier to flag certain things and things like that. So that's where we see a lot of use for it. Clean up logging, clean up cloud virtualization facts, address breaking changes for factor 5, remove legacy features to improve performance. There's been a lot of talk about alternatives to Ruby for writing functions. There's been a lot of concern that people do struggle with Ruby. Better secret management. I think there's no secret that. Sorry, that's a bad pun. I think there's nothing. It's not a surprise that secret management is hard. As I kind of highlighted the kind of components that came together in Magnite of the node encrypt that Ben worked on and other things like that. People find it hard to actually know, have I actually kept my secret safe? And particularly when you want to pull in from something like Vault, none of it is as integrated as it should be.
And documentation for that, I think, is the core.
Yeah.
Like getting it into Puppet is fine, but if it's not documented well enough that someone who's new to Puppet finds it quickly, it doesn't matter.
I mean, to be fair, my blog post being the best documentation that there exists on it is not a good thing.
No, absolutely. Multiple classifiers, I'm going to admit I don't actually know exactly what that means, because I would have said classification simplification to me, because
I had to guess, you can set one external node classifier, like you can plug one.
Yeah.
You can't plug more than one.
Okay.
Without
Okay.
missing something. I think Reed wrote like a multiplexer. They put that in and they configured all numbers.
With being able to have multiple control repos, I could totally see people wanting that. So that, I'm not saying I endorse it, but I see where that would make sense as a feature request.
Right. There are places where Puppet is extensible, but there's only one socket. You can plug one thing in.
Okay. Trusted certificate management, efficient server compiler setup, improved security for sensitive data. We can already touch on that. Puppet native testing. I don't know if people were ever saw that kind of work. I think David Schmidt originally worked on it. It was where you were.
Reviving OPD?
What's that?
Is that reviving OPD?
So it's again, it's an idea. I think actually that was my suggestion Gavin got for that, because testing's my biggest bugbear.
Sorry, can you explain what you mean by Puppet native testing?
So it was the idea that you're able to actually write your tests, in Puppet code, rather than having to kind of write separately in RSpec.
Yes.
That's what the guy from Papier yesterday also wanted to have.
Yeah. Hey. An OSP installer. I guess that feels a little bit weird saying right now. I guess from our point of view, that'd be a Puppet core installer, right? But you know, there's probably some discussion there we probably want to have.
An installer for the open source flavors.
Yes. Puppet containerization. Explore integration with Ansible. Statefulness of Puppet for collaborative work. That's something I think I raised as well, which was kind of I hear that thing about when you've got multiple teams who don't actually work well together, and kind of like you almost wish you could just have separate catalogs and then combine them. That in that kind of area. And I can see some of these repeating here, which is they're probably getting rough notes. So yeah, that's the kind of quick list of things we kind of ran through. Go on, Matt.
Since you already mentioned the NOAA module, would it make sense to also integrate the RPCI and ECHO resource type into core? I see many people using that because it doesn't cause a change, it just prints out something or a real debug statement. And as far as I have seen, there hasn't been done any commit for quite some time.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's potentially something that could really make sense.
Something that came up in conversation yesterday is that DNF5 doesn't work yet, and I would think that would be needed for the next version of Puppet, since that's what the modern operating systems are going to be using.
Yeah.
Is that on the list already, or?
No.
It's only Fedora at this point. It'll be Red Hat 11. So we've got
DNF5 is included in 10.
Is it?
It's not the default, but DNF5 is in 10.
Okay.
But also Puppet 9 is going to last.
Yeah, Puppet 9 will live long enough that this needs to be dealt with in Puppet 9.
Yeah. So actually, I'll share this list out in
Yeah.
Slack, so you're not having to go memorize what's up on a bloody notepad.
Thank you.
But I don't know what's the most productive thing here. Is there any kind of thoughts right now? Anything that sounds nonsense up there? Anything that's most critical?
Can we add stuff to that list?
Yes. No, I mean this is me coming with this is internally what Perforce engineers have discussed and what we're bringing to the table, but we actually want to know what community want.
Something that I see rarely, but namespace types and providers. So similar to what we have of the functions, that we can put them into saying this module has a specific function and use that function, and you can have multiple modules with the same function, but it's namespace, so you can individually say which one. And I sometimes see this happening, that people have modules where there's the same resource type and provider inside, at least the same resource type. And maybe making an option also making types possible to be handled with a namespace.
I mean, to be honest, namespace and everything would be really
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. Anything that gets plugged into it, it's really easy to just
Why not, yeah.
blat over each other's stuff.
Yes.
So, like, provider features or whatever.
Yeah.
It's really common, I don't know, for a couple of providers to want previously in the past it was like rest time gem or something, and so they might both implement the same file that is virtually the same, and then it just gets flipped backwards and forwards every time you run Puppet.
Yeah. So wait a minute. Because I'm a terrible note taker, we find out my 6-year-old son has already surpassed my writing skills.
Mark, well, David's right, Mark. Yeah.
Well, I'm calling you from behind here, Mark. When you were sorry about that there. Voice. Where did that voice come from? You were talking about the namespace and there, was that, like, for example, a couple of modules, both called Nginx, two different, namespaces, if you like. Is it that kind of thing, or is it different?
Consider two modules that both have a resource type called database.
Yeah.
One is from Redis and the other from any other MongoDB, for example. And they haven't prefixed it properly, whether it's a Redis database or it's a Mongo database, it was a database.
Yeah.
And instead of just having a resource type, which is the database, having a resource type which is called similar to what we do with the DeFi types. These are prefixed because they are in classes. But having the same possibility to also do with custom resource types. So there's something like Redis code database.
Gotcha. Or the Puppet 4 functions kind of come to mind.
So and as Ben mentioned, or what was it? Yeah, Ben mentioned. Try to make the option of namespacing everything inside the module. So we already have this with the functions. We have this with plans. You can make and sub-namespace even plans. We have this with classes already. Due to that reason, we have it with by type, but we don't have it with types of providers. Well, module data are fairly simple because within module data you can only, these will only be queried for data that belong to the module and not from foreign modules. So I don't see an issue with that one.
I mean, it's sort of expensive, but it's actually irrelevant.
Yeah, so definitely get things up on the board for Puppet 9 features. You know, I mean, the key thing I'm highlighting here is this is not like the old days of Puppet where we're coming along and saying, what would you guys like? And then we go, that's great, lovely to hear that, but we're picking this. You know, ultimately this is going to be something that's going to go through that steering committee.
Yeah.
And you know, we're going to have to work out together. You know, for me it's key to kind of have some themes. You know, there's maybe things like, you know, modernization, you know, security, you know, just something so we can be very clear when we're kind of saying, hey, Puppet 9's out, here's the top level what you care about, here's the features under each of these things, and it's a much clearer, you know, message of what's coming out and why.
I know on the Vox side, there's some real interest in utilizing G10K, the Golang based R10K, as opposed to the Ruby based R10K.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea if that would be something
The
that
big
would?
problem with that is going to be that the Puppet file can be evaluated as full Ruby, and not everybody uses it that way, but enough
YAML-based Puppet file.
installs, enough large installs are doing full Ruby logic in your Puppet file that you could move it all into Go, but you're still going to have to run a Ruby engine of some sort to handle that, or find a way.
And I didn't know if that was already handled with G10K or not.
No.
Okay.
But, I mean, do you need to sort of try and capture why people are doing that? So what's the most common use cases?
Well, I mean, I'm literally going to talk about one of them in my
Because
lightning
they
talk, so.
Yeah.
Because there might need to be just some extra functionality actually defined to cover some
It
of those
just means that
cases.
we need to make a definition of what the language is and not just evaluate Ruby. Because right now, the definition of the Puppet file is anything the fuck you want to put in there, and that's just not.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you could query a MySQL database to get what your Puppet module should be if you want, but like, should you? Probably not.
You could run a Bitcoin miner.
I'm sure
Yeah.
someone is
It's an idea.
calling out to like Google Sheets API and reading something out of the switch.
Oh, okay.
I know who you're talking about.
But I mean, and this is just my opinion. But like, I feel like there's been a few things where we've gone for ages. Somebody might be using that, so we'll deprecate it, but we won't remove it. And I feel, you know, legacy facts is probably the prime thing for me. Is that went on far too long.
This is
It might
what
be
major
more-
versions are for. Give
Yes.
them one major version and then end it.
So, what is just for context, we're talking about what's coming to Puppet 9 now. Ballpark, when would Puppet 10 be a thing? So like, if we don't do it now, are we talking like a year, 3 years for the next major version from the Perforce perspective, or
Again,
do we know?
We don't.
Like, I don't even remember. It's been so long since I've been.
and-
I don't know what the cadence between major
Is
versions
that a
is
question
now.
for the language steering committee
Yes.
as well, instead of
Because
Yeah.
it's not up to Perforce now ultimately.
Right.
Because
Well, that's
it's
why I said
gonna
just
be-
from like what's. I know there was a rough timeline between major versions
Yeah,
before, but I don't remember what it
It
is.
was rough. You know, Ben can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think it was like 1.5 to 2 years. Was that about right? In terms of major
A
versions
rough
releasing.
time between major Puppet versions.
It was never defined.
Right.
No,
but it
there was
always,
a rough timeline that gotten laid out in the last few years.
right. It was never defined, but historically, it's been 18 months to 2 years.
Yeah. And that's maybe something kind of, you know,
Okay.
to debate. You know, should
Right.
there be a? I don't think we need to have like, you know, there's obviously kind of got to be supported timelines so people have that confidence. But you know, equally, I don't think we want to kill ourselves. You know, strictly just meeting a date to, you know, and sacrificing features or anything.
Correct.
So yeah, I will send that list to Slack because so people have that. Absolutely get things up on the board so we can take notes of all those. Go on.
Finishing the resource API.
Yes.
Sort of surprised maybe that wasn't on the list.
It was.
It was.
Was it?
Yeah, it was.
Right, okay, I need to work.
Go on.
Support for multiple CAs?
Yeah, I mean,
There's a ticket open for about 5 years.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, it's not a new feature because it's been requested.
No. That's. I guess it's that kind of thing of it's time to kind of bring it all up in terms of, I think there's plenty of things that have been neglected in the ticket backlog.
There was, along that same lines, there was some at least preliminary support for using an external CA and subordinate CAs.
Yeah.
But I remember there being some really rough edges on that or something. It sounds like actually finishing that feature would cover this. Because so long as both CAs have the same parent, at least it would. I don't know if it'd help with any other scenario.
I mean, and there'll also be some things to some extent, which is like, in terms of like what's in the steering committees, which are kind of language specifications and things like that. Those obviously need to meet in terms of the ecosystem meeting, but there'll be things that ultimately, if open, just for example, if OpenVox did implement like a multiple CA setup, technically for the ecosystem to work, that doesn't have to happen on the Perforce side.
Right.
I think it would be disadvantageous for us to do that, but there are kind of features that are kind of definitely need to be on both sides and in the language specification to work. But there are other things that are obviously functional but wouldn't affect you being able to run modules.
So, if you want to talk about CA rough edges, come find me later.
Yeah, that was a prodding statement because I knew you would have something to add.
One thing I'll say about it just in general is, I think the key with external CAs is to define what benefit we want to get out of that and make sure that the implementation actually delivers that benefit. Because typically what happens today is it's a lot of work, a lot of rough edges to get it in place, and it actually doesn't really change much in how it operates. So you did a bunch of work, you added a bunch of fragility, and you didn't get anything. So I think that's the place to start is what do we want to achieve with
the use case I had always heard of was,
and then make sure the solution delivers that so that you're getting something for your effort.
the use case I'd always heard of, which happens to be in place where I am now, but I didn't know this whenever I was hearing about it, was there was an existing PKI infrastructure, and because of trust anchors that are set up, they want the Puppet certificates to fall under that same trust anchor. And even if the Puppet system still issues its own certs through a subordinate CA, but having that continuous trust anchor goes back to the core corporate PKI trust anchor was the use case that I'd always heard of.
Yeah, but the Puppet agent historically it's not looking at CPKI, it only trusts very specifically one thing that it's configured to look at. So other than a warm fuzzy feeling, what benefit are you getting? Because you are incurring a huge cost and fragility and setup to do that.
Well, in many places it's just not conversion. Like, security says good.
Right.
Because they don't
That's
understand
better. Or not.
A lot of people use the Puppet agent certs as the cert for a lot of HTTP interactions of things that are set up by Puppet, instead of using like a publicly signed cert. And
Probably should.
I wouldn't go that far.
I think that's sort of
Not if you've already got a
increasing
trusted CA in your corporation that is your PKI base and is in your root store of all of the things that need to interact with it. I mean, there's reasons why not to do that too, but it's very common.
We could definitely talk
Yeah,
like
but
that on CAs.
That was the context I was coming from.
Yeah. So just while I was thinking about it, I'm realising I've brought 7 lovely people from Puppet, and maybe if there's just a quick shout out what team you work for, so people know if they want to come and find something from you, or just ask something that would help.
Hey everybody, my name is Charlie Sharpskin. I work on the support team at Puppet Workers. I've been there for almost 15 years now, so I've seen a lot of things. I've interacted with a lot of engineering folks, so My specialty is debugging Puppet, but I do know kind of a little bit about everything. Just because of my tenure and what I've seen.
If you haven't talked with Charlie, how are you doing in the sequence?
There's a lot of truth to that.
Hi, I'm Gavin Dietrichson, and I've been with Puppet for 5-ish years now, I think. 4 plus, anyways. And I worked with Charlie and that team for a couple of years, and loved my time there, learning how the products work and stuff. And I'm in engineering, so I kind of feel thankful in a way. I've kind of been in the 2 camps. So, anyways, Gavin Dietrichson.
And you're good at stealing prizes from Chef.
What's that? Oh yeah.
You're good at stealing prizes from
I
Chef.
love to get that again.
You're not wearing a chef t-shirt. What's up? We can probably get one for you.
He's not allowed. David Swan, I've been in it for 8 years in the modules team and now in developer experience.
This is your 3rd time at the conference, right?
I've been lucky to come here 3 times. But this is actually the first time they've made me do a talk.
No, I made you do a talk before, just one of the community day talks.
Yeah, but that was more just standing at the front and asking them questions.
I photographic record of it. It happened.
My first official talk. That's on the schedule.
Yeah, I'm Donna Jordy. I've worked with Puppet for 3.5 years. Yeah, worked across I'm Jordan Falls. I work in the integrations team, and I started Puppet just over 2 years ago. Community, and I will be pushing the group set yesterday, and Gavin set it.
I'm Lucas. Been working with Puppet for about 3 years now, mostly the modules and Redux teams. It's about it.
Well, I'm Andy Jones. I'm been at Puppet for just over 5 years now. I'm a professional services engineer.
And just in case you don't know my background, so I'm David Sandlands. I'm now the Community and Dev Relations Lead. I have been a product manager for Bolt, for integrations, for modules at one point, Ford briefly at one point. I was in the Solutions Architects team, and I was a customer for 7 years, both PE and open source. So yeah, just to give that introduction, because it's not just about us. What's that?
You need any more hats to wear?
just because it's not it's not just about us obviously just talking up here. It is about the kind of conversations you can grab with the folk here, which I want them to all get in their trip reports. Remember your trip reports.
Is it my impression, or are there many more people from Puppet than any other year?
Yes, so
well, that depends on your definition of any other year, because this was about average in 2017.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
So last 2 years, usually what? 1, 2?
Last year I think it was just me, maybe. The years before that, Gavin and David and Lucas and the other Gavin all came with me. It wasn't you? Oh, it was Gavin. Yeah, Gavin Patton. That's right.
Yeah, other Gavin.
Yeah. So I mean that's one of the big aims I'm pushing is skipping a little bit towards the community thing I was going to say, but we want to get in schedule events so we're going to be at events in a good number. In my head, ideally, CfgMgmtCamp is clearly the place for Europe for the big event, and something in APAC, something in Americas, and obviously having kind of people moving between regions as well. Because having Charlie here is fantastic, because it's not just fantastic to see people you might not see if he's not in your time zone. It's also fantastic for us because I've been with Puppet for a number of years and never had a chance to meet Charlie. So yeah.
I will say a little bit of trivia going way back. But this conference here, it actually started out as a Puppet camp. So the very first config management camp was called Puppet Camp. And then the second year, we decided that it should be vendor neutral and expanded it out. So this is Puppet's core.
Yeah. And that's kind of something I've pushed.
That's where the name Puppet Camp came from. That was the little short events we did all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah, and somebody, Andrew, had the original Puppet Camp logo. No, somebody had the T-shirt with the original. There you go.
I'll go to 2016.
And the one with
the finger puppets.
on it. The first puppet camp in Ghent Center in Zeeland.
Yeah.
That's where it started.
Yeah.
I was already documented.
That's where you presented here for the first time.
Nigel did tell me I went to the first puppet camp in London. So,
Not as a puppet person now.
well, yeah. So that was the sad days of banking. But no, that's kind of part of what we've been pushing as a plan from the community aspect is we want to find these kind of vendor neutral events where we can kind of we know there's going to be people there, and as if we make people aware in advance that we're going to be at Config Management Camp 2026 with a number of people and actually make that commitment, then it makes it easier for everyone to kind of arrange travel and know that there's going to be enough people here to make it worthwhile.
It might be worthwhile for us to do some brief intros of community people too, but for the benefit of everybody, because a lot of us don't know each other in human form.
This is very true. First time you've been here. First time you've
So,
been here, I think.
hi, I'm Gene. I worked at Puppet for 7 years. I've been in the community before and after. I'm Gene Bean on Slack. You probably will see me around a lot. Nick, you want to say anything?
Yeah, Nick Bergen. I worked at Puppet for 6+ years, and now I'm outside Puppet, working on open Vox and doing overlooking for tech stuff.
Well, no, Tim. this is Tim. Tim makes everything happen.
Tim, what's the other name people know you by?
Sorry.
Still free.
Yeah. It took me a long time to connect Tim Usel to Back Steel Free. That's the same person.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody.
Did you have anything else you wanted to do on the that Puppet 9 list, or
No,
you're gonna shuffle that off to the language committee?
Yeah, I think we shuffle that off to the language committee because ultimately, we can obviously get ideas up, but
I was just going to throw you one.
Yes.
You guys are talking about like something to do like functions in Puppet and stuff like that. An HTTP client would be really nice.
There is an HTTP client built in. It's just not documented very well.
Yeah. Yep.
So it was rewritten a few years ago to be a whole lot better.
Yeah, documentation for it would be really good because it's one of those things that I think a lot of people want and use. And
right.
Probably
I think it was you brought up a
themselves.
little bit ago, like, what if you wanted an HTTP client? And somebody else built one too. There's one already in core.
Yeah.
So Josh Cooper wrote it 2 years ago, I think.
So it's a documentation
about
ask
4
instead
years
of
ago.
a core ask.
It's before I left. Yeah, it was before I left.
So yeah, mark that down in the list. Document the HTTP client.
Yeah, I'll document.
Yeah, it's actually pretty good.
Instead of using REST client or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm doing right now, and I'd like to stop it.
Yeah, REST client's not maintained anymore.
I noticed.
I think to me the only thing that horrified me on that list was the idea of a YAML-based manifest. But I think that the real ask there isn't YAML specifically, but a simpler way of defining resources. It's kind of like the way that Alessandro keeps talking about Tiny Puppet. It's like you don't really want to develop a lot of code if all you need to do is say like, hey, I need these 3 things to happen. But that might be a bit in there. Did you?
I want to add in just a quick question. Does anybody use YAML vault plans or?
YAML vault plans? Hand raised, do people use YAML vault plans?
I don't know that this is the target audience of the YAML vault plan, so to be honest.
No, it is a curious question. I mean, has anyone even seen them in the wild?
No.
That's my,
Not at a single customer.
Because when I was writing the book, I sort of grudgingly wrote the section YAML bolt, and I was kind of like, I don't feel like anyone uses this.
So fun fact about those were originally written for an April Fool's joke, and then we were like, you know what? It's here, why not use it?
I have a Puppet Era 3 or 4 proof of concept of YAML manifests. I really liked it. Everything is data, everything is mergeable, everything is manageable in a hierarchy style. I still have the repo around, to shut it down like crazy. It was just one person came out and it was all in the raw. But I really like it. I think it's a pretty good idea. Obviously, it's super limited. You don't go and put a bunch of language constructs into YAML.
Right.
But if you just wanted to graphic service config, it's not that.
For low barrier to entry getting started, I can, especially having used an Ant Squad, to truly see the desire to use it as part of an onboarding until you need the full Puppet language. But I agree, don't try and cram the DSL into it, but you don't need the DSL for everything.
Yeah, that was a problem with a lot of people putting stuff into Hydra. Is like I watched people literally replicating Puppet code in data, and it was the dumbest thing.
Yeah.
But you can pretty much do YAML Puppet by just putting just having the types module and throw it in Hydra, right?
It's just like ensure packages, same idea.
One of the guys that I work with, he said he isn't on his home Puppet system. He hasn't actually written any Puppet in literally years now. Everything's just been recorded with the text.
My boss did that at cPanel, and what he has described to me is horrific, but he liked it. And so there's definitely a use case for it. Yeah. cPanel's got a huge ass deployment of Puppet. So.
I will point out that Puppet, the company, has a long-standing tradition of taking something way to its extreme.
Yeah.
If a YAML manifest was literally constrained to just what we're talking about here, that would be great. But I feel
we don't want to do lambdas again.
Yes, exactly. Which is what I think. If you tell Puppet to build this thing, I think that's what they would end up doing is replicating some weird, like that YAML script or whatever.
God, my boss actually recommended YAML script the other day.
I think that's also what kind of provides that balance, right? Because, again, coming back to steering committee being, representatives from OpenVox, from key partners like Datadots and others, and, for me, ideally I kind of talked to Sean Millichamp about, a kind of user group. I don't know how to define that yet, but just having that balance to discussing it instead of it kind of going back to one company who interprets it all and inevitably makes it in a way that doesn't actually make sense to all the other stakeholders. I have pinged that list into #Puppet in the Puppet Slack, and I'll put it in the Vox one as well. Actually, I'll put it in Belgium 2025.
Yeah, I think telling us where it is probably good enough.
One of the other things that we had on this section here was talking about a shared testing tooling. So that's like a conversation we've been having for quite a long time. But there's a lot of tools that Puppet has built. There's a lot of tools that Vox has built. There's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of gaps. And we kind of wanted to have a conversation about how we can kind of consolidate and streamline that. So I'm looking at you, Tim, and I'm looking at you, Nick, to maybe like kick off this conversation. Probably Alex too. You've had a lot of input into some of these conversations. But like, what is it that we need to do in the near term to get the experience of testing Puppet code up to where it should be, and also get rid of some of the duplication of effort?
Well,
no pressure.
Where do we start?
Testing's always been a bit of a bugaboo. I believe the open source repos, I guess I'm talking about OpenVox now. I believe the open source repos have some level of acceptance testing in them with Beaker. That mostly just work internally to Puppet because it relies on VMcooler. If we can make that more generic, that'd be nice. In terms of, I don't know, how much do you want to talk about OpenVox versus Puppet in this context?
I mean, to be perfectly honest, I would love it if we used the same test pipeline. I don't think that they're going to do that. So we can talk a little bit of both, what we can share, what we can't.
Just to pause on that for a second, I think part of this road to Puppet 9 is figuring out how OpenVox's repo name Puppet and the Puppet Labs GitHub org's Puppet core repo / the private fork of that.
Yeah.
How the hell do all of these actually interact with each other, and where does stuff come together? Mm-hmm. Because Puppet 9 doesn't exist on either side in a released fashion yet.
No.
And if we're all going to be working on it, we have to figure out how to rectify that in a way that works for everybody. And that's more than just a language steering committee. Like that's a, how do we collaborate on Puppet 9 in an effective way and in a public way? Because if we can't answer that, none of this other stuff really matters.
That's fair.
Because, I mean, literally, that's the basis of everything going forward.
From a testing perspective, it seems like what needs to happen is separating the actual testing from the framework that actually runs the testing, so that it doesn't, so that if you have to use your internal testing for Puppet Labs, you can. If you want to use Beaker, you can. If you want to then write your own, like the tests are the tests, and then what you wrap around the tests doesn't matter. Just like for a module, you know, you can test in GitHub Actions, you can test in a Jenkins file, you can run, you know, PDK or bundle, you can run the tests. And getting us to that point where the infrastructure of the tests is not critical to the test's existence. And the tests probably should actually be open and shared between the two sides so that there are no regressions between the two. That's actually probably something that should almost be pulled out of the module and put in a separate public module that's actually shared between the two sides. Because as part of the language steering committee, writing the tests that define that working is probably really important.
I would love if the actual testing framework and code was shared, but that's probably not going to happen. But if we can agree on what to test for everything, then we can write it however we want, I guess.
But also, this is an opportunity for like one of the reasons why Perforce is going to participate in this partnership here is one of the things that they offer that is out of our scope is potentially throwing more money at bigger, better tests. Like they could do more acceptance testing than we could. They could spin up a fleet of Solaris machines and do stress testing, and we're obviously not going to be able to do that. So I don't think that there has to be complete parity, right? But we have to define what the baseline is, right?
Find the baseline, and we need to look at, like, for the Puppet repo itself, what do we need to test? And then for the Puppet agent package, what do we need to test? For integration testing, what do we need to test? So a lot of the testing within Perforce is functional testing, but it isn't testing like, as I recall, I haven't been there for a minute, like actual customer-like environments and data, and like a PuppetDB that has a ton of data in it. So I would love to flesh that out.
There was a really interesting thing that was done in product management for a while where I think it was Amy Lovejoy. She was working on something around kind of creating kind of profiles. So it's, instead of it kind of be, that horrible testing where you go, yeah, that's stood up right, empty database, that'd be great. Whereas, if you actually had some sort of profiles that were, obviously there's only so far you can go with that, but
They
something
went
represent
farther than I think you know.
Was that?
They went farther than I think you know.
Okay.
So one of the things that was done is there were there's a function to dump PuppetDB and to sanitize the output.
Mm-hmm.
That sanitized dump was being given from DO to people who were running tests against it and doing development against it on a fairly regular basis, which encompassed hellish catalogs. Because there's a lot of stuff that's been there for 18 years and a lot of things that weren't done the best way or were done in esoteric ways.
Yes.
So there was, I don't know how far that ever went and if the people who are doing it are even there anymore, but there was work being done on that. And there was select testing done on the non-sanitized version where we would give dumps of the entire database to people to do select testing on, so long as, with the understanding that that's got all our secrets in it, so please don't put it out for general consumption. So I know there was work like that being done. Fleshing that out, though, would be beneficial for all of us.
Yeah.
Okay. So what do we have for action items here? Like we've got a lot of ideas and a lot of things that we've talked about, how do we go forward? Like I don't think that we need to decide like what goes where right now. We need to decide on a plan for like, is there somebody who wants to take on the work of like consolidating some of these or making some recommendations about what we can simplify or what gaps exist.
So I think on the open box side, we need a testing champion, I suppose. I'm hesitating to volunteer to do that because I have a whole lot of other things I'm looking at, but if anyone's really interested in testing, I think that would be great. And then if there's someone on the Puppet side that we can work with.
Lucy looked really intrigued at that idea.
I'm happy to help
testing champion.
Yeah, I'm happy to help wrangle it from the open box side, but not to be the one figuring out what exactly needs to be tested, because I need answers on this to know what infrastructure we need to stand up.
I'm very happy to
that.
consult.
You're the infrastructure lead here. So.
I definitely want to consult. We need a driver.
I was also just wondering in terms of, maybe just stepping back to the kind of discussion of Puppet 9 features. Obviously it's great we've got these people in this room, but it's obviously a much wider group. How do we kind of gather that feedback from the community? What is the best way?
Honestly, I think that we take what we talked about just now and then get the language steering committee and then let them run it.
Yeah.
And maybe that involves like, I don't know, surveys or interviews or whatnot. Yeah. But I think that's a good, that list that you put together and then our inputs to that, I think that's a really good starting point for the steering committee.
Sure. That makes sense.
If that's fair. Were you doing a thumbs up to the idea of running being the? What's that?
You're standing in front of the camera.
Was that a thumbs up to running being the testing champion or?
If you're talking to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, probably. Yeah, looking. Time may fluctuate.
Like all of our times.
David, is Test Pilots still a living program or is it dead?
The Test Pilots as we knew it, technically not. There is some. Excuse me. Nope, not the second time. There is things being worked on in that area, but yeah.
The reason I asked is that the program formerly known as Test Pilots could be a mechanism for gathering some feedback for the language steering committee and related things, because they've got contacts in open source and PE customers all over the world.
Yeah, that list may or may not still exist. So,
and that's why I'm like, the list existing is key to this.
It relied on the existence of a department that basically doesn't exist anymore. We can reach out to Joe Wagner and see if he has any. Okay.
So if we could revive some of that, I think that would be a good starting point for how we can get feedback to the language steering committee.
I'm gonna go stand over there so I'm not in front of the camera. I didn't realize that I was.
You were for the most part off to the side enough that I wasn't bugging you about it, and then you took the step in front and you got to it before I did it. Does the open source, there was an open source like committee group that had been formed after Test Pilots, does that still exist? Because that would also be...
You're looking at 3 of them.
I know, but like...
No, the 3 of them.
Okay. What? Sorry, was that open source stewards?
Open source stewards.
So internally, I've basically, so it got down to me. I know. To be fair, that's not quite true because like Josh was in it, wasn't he?
He was a satellite member.
Yeah. So I've put that as an action that group needs to be reformed and kind of have a clear statement, a clear support, because one of the things we've had internally discussed is. There was a period after acquisition where what naturally happens is there's a lot of side projects, we need to focus down on something.
Yeah.
And one of the negative effects of that was it did that thing of we should be a product focused company. But the problem is when you don't set out something sensible about how should people engage in open source, some people then clam up and say like, well, I just need to do exactly what my product manager tells me.
Right.
And then other people then take the burden of, trying to maintain, the open source things that are essentially not covered by that, which results in burnout and obviously a lot of pain on both sides.
the reason for the question is more not the actual stewards group itself, the internal, it's the information that group had, which is you had a set of meetings with a bunch of open source proponents, most of which are probably in the room, but some of which are probably not.
Yeah.
And that's a starting point for communications that we desperately need to be able to do.
We as Vox still have all of those connections, and we can. I'm planning on running some of those still.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that because that's something that the language steering committee could use as a way to send out feelers for information to
kind of bluntly speaking, and David, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that the Perforce company is going to continue scaling back those kinds of things.
Yeah.
I don't think that we're going to see that same thing happening. Instead, what they're going to do, because of this partnership that we're talking about building here, is that they're going to rely on us to provide them that information.
And if they give you the data for the list of people to contact, that'd be really nice.
I haven't.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, I think that's the balancing point, right? Because obviously, from our point of view, it's we're in terms of the Puppet core infrastructure, the repos have gone private. Ultimately, yes, we're maintaining those public repos where they were, but OpenVox is rationally making the soft fork. So that who should do what in that open source stewards group moves.
We're defining an interface here, and where how information gets transferred around. And I think that we're the ones that identify what community needs are. We're the ones that make the call and say, hey, Perforce, these are things that we need you to do for the community. I think that's kind of our responsibility now.
Just circling back to what I was talking about earlier, is there, and it's okay if we have to still figure this out, but is there an answer to how we, at a code level, work together on Puppet 9 yet? Or is that something that is still totally up in the air? Because there's effectively 3 different repos right now where that work could land. There's the internal one, there's the Puppet core one that's effectively dead, and there's the OpenVox fork of it.
So those are things that have to be worked out, because I can tell you right now, the Puppet Labs repos, as I said before, will receive CVE 9+ vulnerability fixes, but I can't tell you right now, will those repos be updated to be in line with specification of Puppet 9? I don't have an exact answer for that, and that's where some questions have to be asked.
I do want to point out really quick that we're getting way ahead into the whole Q&A session that we've got planned in an hour. So just to we still do have several other things to get to, including your Puppet file.
Yeah.
So I think that we resolved that you are going to talk about some testing, and then maybe you can pull other people into the conversation. Probably at least Tim or the PMC. Is that about where we landed on that? Okay. Cool. Do you want to, I don't remember who asked, but somebody asked if you could do a 5-minute recap of the OpenVox testing pipeline, and then maybe get Gene up to talk about what we still needed. Sure. As far as the 2 of you have been talking about infrastructure for getting acceptance testing, and then gem publication and other things.
Yeah, sure.
And then we can move on to starting the Vox elections and everything. Is that fair? Sure. Cool.
And I will remind everyone, if you don't take socks out of that suitcase, that is literally what I have to take out with me.
So many socks.
Well, I think you're still short, at least one.
Oh, I think we take one pair each time.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So, just a quick plug, I guess. As of like 15 minutes ago, I started fleshing out this wiki, and I put a lot of the relevant stuff on this sidebar so that we can find it more easily, which includes like the top level epic issues, the project board, various things, and relevant to builds, OpenBox builds work. So you can read through this page if you want to see a bit more detail about how exactly it all works. The TLDR is that basically I took Vanagon, extended some of Jeff Clark's work in improving the container support within it, and the OpenBox builds are all built inside containers for all the different platforms. So you can build all of them on one computer using Docker and emulation for architectures that are not your host architecture, which is what I was doing in the beginning, just doing the repackaging. Now they live in GitHub Actions, and so, for example, Vox agent. So I just built this yesterday. This was the Puppet 7 version of OpenBox. And so now that GitHub has ARM runners, we separate them into ARM and non-ARM. So to build the agent, you need Puppet runtime. You need PXP agent, which OpenBox is not really using very much, but there are little pieces of it that people use. And then both of those feed into this OpenBox agent Vanagon repo. So you can certainly run this on your own computer. This is basically just calling out to a handful of rake tasks, and those are also laid out in this document. So there's a tag task, and the most relevant one is the build task. This will basically just do bundle exec build -- engine docker, and that will create the artifacts. And then there's an upload task, which you won't really be able to use without the S3 credentials that we use for uploading to OSL, which is what is hosting the yum-and-apt.overlookhypertech.com, where the repos actually are. And there are also a couple promote rake tasks. So when you build Puppet runtime, you then have to promote that into the OpenBox agent Vanagon repo, and that means telling that Vanagon repo where to find that artifact on the OpenBox artifacts S3 bucket, which is where we put all the intermediate pieces. I think that's a really quick TLDR. The server and DB are still using EasyBake, which is also what Perforce uses to build those. A slightly modified version of EasyBake, the metadata and stuff is changed to Vox Pupuli and OpenBox, with appropriate attributions to Puppet. And then that one is not in GitHub Actions yet. I intend to do that next week when I get back home. So this whole process should be fully viewable. Smortex has been doing a lot of great work to make the builds reproducible. I believe the agents 8.11 isn't, but the next agent will be 7.35, I believe, is reproducible. So you can go build it and see the exact same checksums of everything and workflow. There's a few little issues in there that he's still working through, but that's pretty close. And when I think of anything else I'm forgetting, I think that's a high level overview.
How to contribute a new platform.
How do you contribute a new platform? So, adding a new platform is pretty easy, generally. So, if you're not familiar with how Vanagon works, there's a configs folder here with components, platforms, and projects. And components are each of the pieces that go into the package. So you can see in the agent here, we have a bunch of modules. We have OpenSSL, Ruby, Puppet, all the good stuff. And then projects is what you're actually building, so OpenBox agent. And then platforms is where you define all the different little differences between the platforms. So a lot of this, I've tried to keep in the Vanagon defaults themselves, so that really all that happens inside this Vanagon repo are any differences from the defaults, so additional packages that aren't defined in the defaults. I'm not going to dive too far into this, but the defaults are in the Vanagon repo. We have our own fork of Vanagon, lib, Vanagon, platform, defaults. And so you can see, what's being installed every time you build something for Debian 11, 8, or 64, how it's provisioned. So adding a new platform, usually if it's just like if you're going to Debian 13 or you're going to EL10 or something, it involves creating a new default here. And most important part of this now with our build system versus classic Vanagon is adding these Docker images and Docker Arch. So find a suitable image, for Debian that's really easy. For EL, it's a little different. EL10 isn't released yet, so we're having to use Alma Linux 10 Kitten, which is the question.
Is it required that the image is available on Docker Hub, or can you pull from other registries as well?
You can pull from other registries, and for example, /15, you can specify that here, because it's not in Docker Hub, but it defaults to Docker Hub. And then in here, you could also define it in here, but it's better to put it in Vanagon because everything's going to use that. These platform bumps usually don't require a lot of changes. Sometimes you'll have to go in and tweak a few things if you see some errors during compilation. If you're adding something brand new like Arch or a very different platform, you'll probably have to do more work in the actual Vanagon repo. If you look in some of these files, these components, there's a lot of twisty code paths around if you're this platform, do this, if you're this platform, do this. So there may be a lot of things there. But generally adding something like Debian 12 or EL10, pretty easy.
There's a YAML list that needs to be added to too, right? Like where you broke it up. Or did you change that? Because you were showing that the other day.
The YAML list?
It's like, I think it's where you listed what went to the x86 runners and what went to the...
Oh, yes.
That very simple list.
That is another thing I forgot. So, this OpenBox agent, the GitHub action that defines all of that, within the agent repo, this build.yaml is just calling out to a shared workflow, pretty much. And so that shared workflow lives in this shared actions repo. And I believe Vox has another thing like this, so we'll probably smash them together at some point. But this is where the primary build machinery is. And at the moment, our default list of platforms is right here. So if you add one, you'll want to add it here. I don't know if this is where we're going to keep it long term. And you can always override this list, so you give it a comma separated. So like if you did a build and one of them failed and then you made a tweak, you could override the platform list input and just give that one. But if you're adding a new platform, add it here. Yeah.
One question about the Red Hat images. Are you using the UBI Docker image?
No, not using the UBI image because they're missing a bunch of packages from their repo that we need to build stuff. So I'm using generally Alma Linux, and for EL7 I think Oracle, because that's really the only thing available for EL7 anymore on Docker Hub. We could go back to using something like CentOS, I suppose, but there are no repos for CentOS 7 anymore, so.
We've got those probably on here.
What are you missing? You have them right.
I don't remember specifically.
Yeah, we'll have a look.
Yeah, there's just some pieces that you need to build some of the agent stuff that just wasn't in the Red Hat repo, so you have to jump through a bunch of hoops to add other repos. So using Oracle was easier. It's Oracle, but you know it's supposed to be binary compatible. But the rest of them, EL8, EL9, EL10, I'll use almost.
Jing potentially has a solution. He says that they already have that, and we just built it in there if we can.
For CentOS?
Mm-hmm. We've wrapped a lot.
But there are no CentOS repos anymore to like install.
Yeah, they are. They're just prefixed with Vault.
Oh,
they're still there.
You copied the entire thing?
No, you don't have to. They're vault.centos.org is the thing. Always has been, and they're all still there.
Oh, I didn't think they were. They're all gone now.
There's a lot of mirrors all of them, and yeah, we've got them mirrored.
Well, we could certainly move over to CentOS.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter too much.
I've got most of the 7 variants, like 7.1 or 7.0, 7.1, 7.2, 7.6, and 7.7. I think mirrored.
7.
I might. I'm not sure. And then we've got all my 8.4 and 8.8, but of course all my stuff's available. But we've got all that because that's what most of our stuff is.
For what it's worth, all of the EL7 variants are dead. They Oracle Linux went into life at the end of the year, so none of them are getting updates anymore.
So that image may disappear from Docker Hub.
But
yeah, that's why we'll want to use this.
Yeah, we've got the Docker images.
I honestly wouldn't build for it anymore.
Well,
there's a lot of us that can't migrate off yet, and we need the agent to keep working on it so we can get to a modern version of server.
So we actually did have that conversation earlier about how far back we should go, and right now we're looking at just 7. But I think in the future that might be part of the governance group, like deciding what the support roadmap is.
And specifically, we're only talking about keeping agent support for some of these ancient things, not server or DB. It's just so that you can get your crap updated to current versions of Puppet and OpenVox.
I see what you're going for there. I just wonder if maybe getting a build out of it and then just not updating it past that. You know, so at least there was some step. I understand needing a step, right?
Yeah, it all depends on how long it keeps working from like a compiling point of view.
I just worry about the security side of it. Like, if we're going to have a build of it, we need to be able to build it in a CVE 9+ sort of way. Like, we may not build regularly to it, but if there's a security...
If an old version is available and you said it's not supported anymore, and there's a security problem with it, then that's the problem of whoever's using it.
Right, yeah. The question is, what do we define as support then? And that's a question for later, I think.
Also, the attack surface of the build container is something to consider. It's a container running on a GitHub Actions runner that isn't taking in public internet traffic.
Right.
It's just running a catalog compilation, spitting out an RPM. You know, using the last published Oracle 7 image.
Yeah. And I would love to
What's
stop.
the attack surface?
Yeah, and I would love to stop building EL7. There are more workarounds we have to do for it because it's so old. But we need to make sure that everyone is happy when that happens. You'll also notice, just one more minute, there are a few things missing from this list. This is mostly the list that Perforce supports right now for the agent. Some of these we'll probably get rid of, like 3.2.18, again, really EOL. But there are no Mac or Windows agents on here yet. That is trickier. I haven't had time to go in and figure out the right way to build all that. You have to build them on Mac and you have to build them on Windows. So if anyone is particularly interested in doing that,
sounds like it'd be a great lead in for me.
Yeah.
So when I said hire, I'm doing exactly what I pestered Ben about earlier.
What goes around comes around.
My mantra for the last year or so is don't be the guy I cuss. And I just failed. So, as I said earlier, my name's Gene. The part I didn't say earlier is when I worked at Puppet, I worked on the team that built and maintained all the infrastructure for engineering and product, including all of the testing, all of that infrastructure. And so I kind of got a little bit of knowledge on that. And a couple of my co-workers at my current company also came from that team. And we've been given the okay to help Open Vox get all of our stuff up and going and do it on work hours. So I just say that to say so y'all know where I'm coming from. Nick's done an awesome job getting a bunch of the stuff going in GitHub Actions, but like he said, they just added ARM runners. That gives them x86 Linux, ARM on Linux, limited Mac OS runners, limited Windows runners, which those two runners might get us where we need to be for Windows and Mac builds, but they might not. We just haven't gotten there yet. Hopefully it will, but what it definitely doesn't do is some of the more esoteric platforms that people have probably seen in the supported list, like AIX, Linux on Power, Spark Solaris. There are very big customers who use those and use them today, and I know this. But those same very big customers historically funded the hardware to facilitate doing the build and testing pipelines. And so to quote what Tim has said in Slack and other places more times than I can count now, sponsorships welcome. For things like building on some of these other oddball platforms, if anybody wants them, help us get the infrastructure to do it. And given that it's a reasonable amount of work that can be done by an open source community, we'll make it happen. As far as other infrastructure, the big question right now is what do we actually need versus what has there historically been, because those two are not the same. One, we're not a commercial entity and we don't need to do some of the things that Perforce either is doing or used to do. But also, they had, somebody said Puppet's 18 years old now, is that right? 20 years old now?
Yeah.
Cool.
Holy shit, it is 20.
Yeah. So
this year is the 20th anniversary.
Nice. So next year, Puppet can drink in the U.S.
Which is why we party here.
Yes.
It is gonna get drunk.
I would imagine, like most things that are almost old enough to drink, there have been a few mistakes made and a lot of baggage carried along. We don't have any of that baggage. We don't have 20 years of infrastructure built up that the cost of change is ungodly high. We don't have product managers tell me that I can't recreate the build pipelines because it would scare the shit out of too many people and might break something for a paying customer. So we get to do things the modern way, like GitHub Actions. But we still need to do the basics, like provide Yum and app downloads, eventually Chocolatey and homebrew packages, and provide rsync mirrors and all that fun stuff. And that's what we need to work on now. Nick, did you get signing handled through the secrets in GitHub, or are you still working on signing?
I have signing. I moved it off of my laptop into a VM in GCP. That's as far as I've gotten so far.
So, just as an example, something that had started inside of Puppet that I think we're going to do here too is, package signing is something that is pretty important. Really, really, really important in a lot of cases. And so you want to be really careful with how you control those keys that do the package signing. The plan, for transparency, the plan is to use either a VM or ideally something like a Cloud Run instance or a Lambda to spin up, do the signing, spin down. And the keys are stored in the cloud provider provided secret store. That's literally what's being done at Perforce now. It's been vetted by some really good security people I know. No, it's not perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better than any other option we've come up with that isn't ungodly expensive. And so that's how we're planning on handling package signing. Gems aren't being punched yet, are they?
Not yet.
Okay.
What do we need in order to get there? I think is where we're...
I want to make sure I'm not saying something we've already answered. Vox Pupuli's got a gem space, right?
Yes.
Okay. barring objection, I would imagine that things like the Puppet gem that we've all used in CI forever, I imagine that's going to be the open Vox gem that I would imagine will get published into the Vox Pupuli namespace. And so I would imagine all we need to do that is pull the trigger on putting the build to gem into a GitHub action and actually doing it.
And the same for Factor.
And the same for Factor.
Do we need to build our own Factor for now?
Well, does Perforce continue building Factor? Probably not.
That's the question.
I don't.
Yeah.
David, where'd you go? David, do you happen to know from your list of stuff that isn't closed off if Factor is one of those things?
Factor's already closed off.
So currently Factor is private.
Okay, I thought it was. I just want to make sure I wasn't saying it wrong. So yeah, we'll need to publish OpenBox and Factor, and maybe we can work. Maybe Perforce will be game to work with us on something we can do for helping people know that they need to port. I don't know how best to do that.
Honestly, though, I would like to propose that you take this back to Perforce and say that of all the projects that closed off, Factor was the dumbest one. Because this is a common specification for how you engage with operating systems. It's like Factor is the specification there. Factor is that reference. I honestly think that they need that to be open for us to both collaborate on.
So,
but you.
No. So I'm I don't want to bias opinion, because I have my opinions. But one of the important things we all get from here is if there's something where you're going like, because the core message is if we say, can you just undo everything, it's going to be obviously going to be no.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But if it's something like, well, tell you what, I understand you're doing this for these business reasons, but this piece doesn't really seem to really be that business reason. If you did this, if you opened this, or we agreed a cooperation method on this, then things would work much better for these reasons. Then that's something easily we can take back and say, community, customers, are seeing this, and that what helps us work together.
And if the answer for that is that the open box copy of Factor is the de facto one, like the open box agent or the open box repo named Puppet will be the default for everybody who's not paying Perforce money, then I think that's okay, but I think that's something that we need to clearly communicate everywhere, because there's things like FactorDB that is not owned by Perforce, that is critical for Perforce to do anything, because that's where all the data for facts come from for all the testing, not to mention the fact that all the CI is busted for everybody right now.
Yeah.
All the facts need to resolve exactly the same, regardless of the implementation that you're using. So the only business advantage that Perforce could get is if they could yay, look, ours is faster. Nobody cares if it's faster. That's stupid.
You're not putting AI in Factor, are you?
No. Summarize.
CfgMgmtCamp.
So whatever you decide, we need to get to the point where Factor is it's exactly the same.
Yeah. Factor is right there with the language spec.
Yeah.
It has to be identical. Or it's perfectly fine to ship. I see your hand up, I'll get to you in 1 second. It's perfectly fine to supplement facts with things like the ones that come from PE, just like is done today, or ones that come from our other modules, just like is done today. But the actual base has got to be the same, because it's, like Ben said, it's effectively like language spec.
There may have been some internal debate about this as well.
That wouldn't surprise me.
So it's just that's the thing. It's a huge part of this is obviously that core message is set up at the top, and then it is just kind of saying,
how do we make
I see
this a
what you're trying to
reality?
do here and why these things first happen, but these create roadblocks or just things that don't work.
Well, and honestly, this one being included may not actually fit in that core message.
Yes.
Do the Ansible people still use Factor? So if
They
if
use
we do
Factor
have to
today,
be
and they're switching. Unless we can convince Perforce to revert it, they're switching to OpenBox.
Right, I was going to say, but we would collaborate with them on Factor then,
Yeah.
I guess. Because why not?
Yep.
So I guess the last of what I had was, so I know we need repos and mirrors. I know we got to get gems published. I know that once we figure out what we're going to test, we need the infrastructure to run those tests on if it's outside GitHub Actions, or if it requires private runners, or whatever the case may be there. Question for the audience. Who here does not know what VM Pooler is and how it works? Okay, that tells me everything I need to know. So,
can you read
What's
the word?
VM Pooler.
Oh.
Can you write it on the?
Absolutely, happy to.
I think they're teasing you.
Hey, that's okay.
I think some people know of it. But
Okay.
Depends on how you define how it works.
Okay, so extremely short overview of how testing at Puppet works. Y'all have all seen the matrix of stuff that Nick showed earlier and how it's actually even bigger at corporate side. There's two types of tests that we all run. We run static tests, like spec tests and stuff like that. And there's acceptance tests where you actually need something to run the test on that is that thing. The matrix of operating systems and the chips that they run on is north of 100 different systems running across x86, 32-bit, and 64-bit, ARM, Spark, and Power, and at one time HPUX. Though HPUX is gone.
Oh, you finally got rid of it?
Oh yeah, HPUX was gone before I left.
Oh, that.
Yeah. The last paying customer didn't pay anymore, and so we killed it. We shot it in the head.
We didn't throw a party.
Oh, we did. We absolutely did.
Why didn't you tell us? It's a party all over the world.
Me too rude about HPX. I started as HPX admin.
A lot of people started there, and you notice they're not still there. I spent many years as a Spark Solaris admin. You couldn't make me go do it again. But to do that testing, you got to have a system of that type to run the acceptance test in. That's what VM Pooler provides. VM Pooler, you give it a template, either live running or a template that can spin up either a virtual machine, or we're just going to pretend it all runs in VM Pooler and not the esoteric bastard that sits behind VM Pooler called NS Pooler, or non-standard Pooler. You need an instance to run it in. You need that instance to be exactly the same every time you run the test, so you need it reset to a known good state, effectively rolled back to a snapshot. The way that works is there's a HTTP interface, and Jenkins says, hey, I need these systems of these types. Give them to me, please, through an intermediary. But that's not really mattering. It spins up all those instances and says, here's the host names of all the instances you want to run your tests in. Go forth and run your tests. Jenkins does all the acceptance testing, tells VM Pooler it's done with the machines. Those machines are all deleted, and the next time tests need to run, new clones are spun up. This can be done in VMware. Today, this can be done in VMware, GCP, or AWS. One of my coworkers, as soon as he gets a little bit more time, is going to write the integration so that it works in Proxmox. 100% open source, still out there, available for everybody to use. People outside Puppet do use it. We can, if we want, as OpenBox, use VM Pooler for acceptance testing. The restriction is not the technology. The restriction is, if you're running VMs, that ain't free. We either need cloud credits to run them, or we need physical servers and hypervisors to run them on, or both, depending on the scenario. And so if we want to run acceptance tests on agent, server, PuppetDB, or OpenBoxDB, or we want to run integration tests, like I can run all these components together, and all these various agents can actually get a catalog from them. Or we want to run acceptance test pipelines like are done at Puppet, the company, of I've got OpenBox 8, and I want to upgrade that to OpenBox 9 and know that it still works. We need somewhere to run that stuff. If we as a community want to see that happen, we need sponsorship.
So, and that sponsorship might be, hey, I have a data center that I'm willing to share.
Yeah.
And he'd be the person to talk to
Yeah.
make that happen. Sorry, go ahead, Nick.
You mean I can't just post you some Spark hardware?
If you can purchase some Spark hardware and give us a place to put it in with internet access,
That's the trickier bit, isn't
Can we work with keep that stuff running?
do what?
Who wants to keep that stuff running?
Keeping the hardware running is actually not that hard.
I mean the cost of energy.
Oh yeah. The answer to that is the companies who still need it.
Yeah.
And honestly, whether or not we do some of the more esoteric platforms is going to depend on if any of those companies want to use OpenVox, or if they want the OpenVox stuff to be tested against those platforms.
I think we just answered that question.
Yeah.
Is that what if we get somebody who wants Spark testing? Alex is going to host them a couple of machines and they'll set up a network, and we'll run it there.
Can VMPooler like integrate with PDUs? Can it power off physical hardware?
VMPooler itself cannot, but there is correction. Today, it does not have that function. It would not be hard to add it. So VMPooler itself is a Sinatra application written in Ruby, and it defines basically stub methods for all the things you need to do for a virtual machine of a given type. You need to know how to power it on, power it off, clone it, add remove disk, expand the disk, all those things. To make it actually work on a system, you make a provider that implements those functions. So there's one for vSphere, there's one for AWS, there's one for GCP. There's also integration with Google's Cloud DNS, so that you can specify the DNS name. I think there might be Route 53 support, or we may just use Google DNS for that today. Because you need to have a DNS name for a lot of the work. But there's nothing saying that you couldn't add an optional method that a provider could then implement for power down. That's actually something we've talked about for many times. But the base hypervisor, though, is really all that needs to be owned. You have the option, which right now it defaults to on demand, but you have the option of only spin these instances up when you need them, spin them up on demand, or to have all of them or a subset of them own and ready. Examples why you might want to do that. You know you've got people using this stuff on a regular basis. Who here works with Windows on any regular basis? Yeah, I knew there were a few of you. How long does sysprep take to run on first boot? 5 to 15 minutes minimum? Who wants to wait 15 minutes on a VM to boot? I see no hands. That's why you might want some that are pre-pooled. And that's exactly why internally we kept a small number of Windows instances and other ones that took a long time to do their boot cycle. We would keep a very small number of them pre-provisioned. You come in and you check one of those out, in the background, that pre-provision pool is being refilled. And so there's a small number of them always available because internally at Perforce, developers also check these out on an ad hoc basis to use them to do testing as they're writing their code. Here in OpenVox, we could do the same if we wanted to.
So I do think this is probably the most robust way to do integration testing, to actually run it on real VMs and real OSs. There's probably a way we can do it through containers and do it on GitHub Action Runners. It'd probably be a little janky, it'd probably be slightly less confidence because it's inside a container, it's not running the actual VM. And I have no idea how much work it would be to, you run a server and agents on the same host, and you gotta get the Docker networking set up right and all that. But that is potentially an option if we don't have the money to actually implement this.
In the back.
So, how is this different, better, whatever, than using Beaker?
So Beaker only executes the test. Beaker needs somewhere for the test to actually run.
Right, and there are plugins for Beaker and Google Cloud and so on.
So Beaker has that provisioning logic in it, the plugins you just mentioned. There are a few plugins that sort of spinning the VM up on whatever talk to the input. And again, the benefit, which Gene kind of talked about, is having like a warm up ready. You don't have to wait however many minutes for the VM to come up ready. It just hands you one that's immediately ready to go.
There's absolutely some overlap there.
Of course there is, Puppet built it.
Yeah, absolutely. But there is a lot more of this logic already defined, especially about the places to run it in VM Pooler than there is in Beaker. One of the things that VM Pooler handles is the defining of the machine images themselves and like what templates to clone and where those templates live and all that other stuff. And you can support multiple backends simultaneously. And you tell VM Pooler, I need these instance types, and it might get some from Google, some from Amazon, some from vSphere, some from Proxmox. There's no reason why it couldn't also get some from Docker or Podman or whatever. Yeah, it's not so much about whether it's VM Pooler or Beaker. It's about how do we want to do the acceptance testing. Do we want to? Are we okay with doing it in QEMU and it being not really on that system? For a lot of things, I'm sure the answer is yes. But we as a community need to figure out where that line is.
So, just as a question, I know we've partnered with Oregon State's open source lab. They have data center space. Do we have access to any of that? So if people have some, like I'm thinking x86 and ARM64 hardware where it's like the core stuff that we really want to be able to test on. If people donated a little bit of high-end hardware that could go there to be a core starting point.
So what we have at OSU, the OSL, is like any of the services that they have, we can use.
Okay.
But like we obviously don't want to like consume all of their stuff without giving back and be bad internet citizens.
Yeah.
So yes, it's entirely possible. I would like for us to be able to like carry our own weight a little bit. So
I wasn't saying like use their servers. I was saying like,
oh, we can. We totally could.
Right, but like if we sent them servers so that we weren't like taking their space.
Just to support that.
And then sponsorship, just as an example of a place to make a sponsorship. I haven't gotten like the formal okay, but I've gotten soft okays that like, we've got data centers, my company's got data centers all over the world, or colo space all over the world. You know, we could rack some stuff potentially, or provide some data center space and cover the cost of the internet bandwidth for it.
Right.
Like that's a possibility, but other places hopefully will do the same.
We got credits from like AWS and Google and so on.
Yeah, I mean, ideally we do almost all of it in a cloud
Tim
provider.
knows all of the stuff that we have.
So I mean,
Yeah.
is that not good enough for most of the things that?
For 90% it would be probably.
Oh, we'll chew through that in minutes if we do the full acceptance testing.
So Vox Pupuli received a lot of requests for sponsorship in the kind of virtual machines in the past months, and that's really kind from different individuals, but also from companies. But the issue for us is that we now have like a dozen virtual machines all in different places of the world, and none of them have enough compute power to run all of our tests. And we have one physical server somewhere in the United States that loses IPv6 connections on a regular basis. We have a few very beefy virtual machines at CERN, but we do not have root access to them. We try to run GitHub Action Runners on all of those virtual machines, but the design of GitHub is that they usually assume that every runner is started for each pull request and afterwards deleted. That's not our setup at the moment. Our GitHub runners are running continuously, and which leads to different errors. So the easiest way to support the current Vox Pupuli testing, and which probably covers 90% of this, is to increase the amount of GitHub runners we receive from GitHub. And that's very easy when you give us more money. Very, very easy. So GitHub sponsors us already 80 concurrent runners, which is very awesome. But they are limited in their specs. They have like 4 virtual CPU cores and a few gigabytes of RAM. And with a bit more of money, we would be able to buy bigger runners. The same for Linux and for Windows and for macOS. And this would cover 99% of the use cases that we have for testing modules, all the gems in our tooling ecosystem, but also the new packages from the Open Vox project.
Ideally, we only run this expensive testing on a very limited as-needed basis, not on every single commit like is done internally at Perforce.
But I do want to point out here that this isn't really the venue for making decisions on things. This is not, like, we're not making decisions right now. We're not deciding what we're going to do. The point of this conversation is so that everybody knows what we are struggling with, what resources we need, what kind of ways you can step in to help, or if you know somebody who can step in to help. If you know somebody with a big data center that's just sitting there idle and they're looking for something to do with it, talk to this guy. That's kind of what we're trying to do here. And I will also put in a plug to say that, hey, Perforce is doing a lot of these same kind of things, and it might make sense if Perforce were to step up and help us get this acceptance testing out there so that we can have similar levels of quality.
David, I know for a fact that VM Pooler's use is being expanded, not contracted within Perforce. I also know the number of staff that y'all have trying to work on that. There are places here we could collaborate and work together and both would benefit. And you might not lose people running out the door because you killed them.
So summary, this is Gene Bean. He's in the Slack, and he's active on Mastodon and has other ways to get a hold of him. If this conversation has inspired you in any way to help or to link him with some kind of resources, this person is the person you need to talk to help us get this figured out.
There's been a question back there in the back before we wrap up.
Yeah, Tim just asking, can you specify the amount of money that the bigger runners would probably cost? I know it's a bit fishy to ask, but...
Yeah, so that's a bit complicated to figure out because bigger runners are built per minute per CPU time, and GitHub doesn't expose some statistics about the amount of CPU time we use at the moment on their free runners. I know that, I mentioned it in my Ignite talk, we wasted like $100 on a single day just testing bigger runners. So they are quite expensive. And it doesn't make sense to use the big runners for everything that we have. But there are a few Git repositories with a lot of tests that also receive a lot of contributions via pull requests. And for those few repos, it would make sense to use the bigger runners. And the issue that we have at Vox Pupuli at the moment is that we receive a lot of funding, but it varies between every month. So it's very hard for us to plan in advance, and it doesn't make sense to spin up bigger runners and configure everything if I do not know that I have still enough money in 2 months to pay for those runners and I have to roll back again. So that's why I'm asking for.
The real answer really is the more money we're sponsored, the better tests we can run. And so that's going, like, it's a linear line.
Well, the
More
question
money,
is also,
better tests.
what's a useful amount is enough? If I give you a 10 or whatever, it's useless. What's a useful amount?
Well, if everybody of you gives me a 10, that's so.
Yeah, the nice thing with money is we can pool it all together and get the bigger thing that we need. Whereas like credits or individual pieces of hardware, individual VMs, they're limited by what that individual thing can do. We can pool the money together. We can't do that with a lot of other things.
And I will say that much better than you giving $10 a month is for you to go to your boss and say, hey, you know what? Here is a project that we depend on, and we need to ensure its long-lived success. Can you contribute $1,000 a month?
And I would love it if we could do everything in GitHub Actions. Please don't take any of my talk about being cooler as thinking otherwise. I just know that there are certain things that we can't do in Actions, and that's what we need to cover with some of that other stuff. Lightning talks or something else?
Hand it over to Tim to do elections, right?
Yeah, sure. It's not that I planned anything, but so as every year, hello everybody, Vox Pupuli elections. Before we start talking about those, I still have some of those awesome finger puppets left, so please take them home. I'm not interested to take them back on the train journey. They are paid with your money, so please. It's basically already yours. So Vox Pupuli elections. Who of you have heard about the Vox Pupuli PMC before? It's like 95%. Okay, cool. So PMC, Project Management Committee. That's a group of 5 people. We try to do yearly elections for this group. If you would like to be part of the PMC, you can apply for one of the seats, or if you know someone where you think it makes sense that this person joins the PMC, you can write an application on their behalf. What does the PMC do? Vox Pupuli is basically split into 2 groups. One is very, very large, that's all the contributors or collaborators that we have. And there's this very, very small group, the Project Management Committee. And it has 2 jobs roughly. One is that Vox Pupuli has a code of conduct, and the job of the PMC is to enforce the code of conduct. So read the mailing list from time to time, maybe check into Slack or the IRC channel, and just read the conversations and figure out if someone is very rude to someone else or if someone complains about something. We have this in place since 8 decades, I think now, and there was 1 or 2 complaints in this decade, so this is really low effort. And on the other side, Vox Pupuli uses the lazy consensus approach to make decisions. This means if someone wants to make a very, very big decision, for example, Robert doesn't like Enterprise Linux anymore, and he makes a proposal to drop Enterprise Linux from all modules that Vox Pupuli owns, it would make sense to gather some feedback from everybody that's active within Vox Pupuli. And in the rare situation that 50% of the group are in favor of his proposal and 50% are against his proposal, the PMC has an additional vote, so we can make a decision. That's basically everything that the PMC people have to do. You're not required to work on all the Puppet modules that we have or all the tooling. That's really not necessary. Just work a bit on the code of conduct and check if there are any lazy consensus decisions coming up. That's basically what the PMC is about. Okay.
And then the third one, housekeeping our GitHub orgs.
Yes. So traditionally, the PMC people also have administrative access to our GitHub organization. That means we do a bit of onboarding for new people, and if someone leaves the community, we revoke permissions, stuff like this. Now that Vox Pupuli is growing a bit, it probably makes sense to move all those administrative tasks to another subgroup that we can implement. So it's not required that the PMC does all of this stuff, but we did in the past. And it's up to us to decide how we would like to do this in the future. Any questions about the PMC? Not the case. Perfect. Everybody knows how it works and is eager to apply. Great.
What are the dates?
Sorry?
What are the dates that we're going to
The dates. So Gene will be running the election this year, and it's up to him to decide for what period of time you can apply. Previously, we had 3 to 6 weeks to create your application. We will probably put out a blog post on voxpupuli.org today or tomorrow, something like that, with all the dates and also links to where you can provide the application. We have one constraint for the PMC. A maximum of 2 people that are working for the same company can apply. We introduced that some time ago so that no company can overtake Vox Pupuli, basically. But I think that's about it.
The info Tim gave me leading up to today was that we would announce elections today. There would be roughly 3 weeks for people to get their nominations in, and then let's see how long I put this in here. After we've got that in and there's at least 5 submissions, we'll start voting, and as Tim said, there'll be a blog post announcing all of this, and that post will get referenced on the mailing list and in Slack and IRC. And I'll get some more concrete dates into that blog post. But rough answer, 3 weeks from today, or until we've got at least 5 people nominated / volunteering.
Any further questions? Yes.
Is there any required continuity on between years? Like of people, like you probably don't want 4 or 5 positions to change, or is that?
I don't think we ever had that.
No.
I read all the docs. There's no requirement for it. In the years that I've been involved, I've never seen more than 1 or 2 people cycle off at a time.
Yeah.
I think 2 people might have cycled off last year.
I think so. Yeah.
I think there's one point too that you didn't bring up that I want to highlight too, is that we've always had the unofficial requirement that like Puppet employees were accepted, like Puppet employees could be on the PMC, except for like decision makers. So if anybody had like decision making power within Puppet so that they could affect things that Puppet did, they couldn't also affect the decisions that Vox Pupuli was making. So I think that right now that's like David and maybe a few other people. But that means that Perforce employees, like any of you sitting back there, you are totally welcome to throw your hat in.
And I think that would make total sense. Like we first, I think 2 PMCs, we had Hunter Horton in the PMC, and that was really awesome because that enabled Vox Pupuli to have a very, very close relationship to Puppet back in the days. And if we ever had a situation where we had to escalate stuff to someone within Perforce, it's really, really helpful to have someone from Perforce in the PMC. So if some of you in the back would like to apply, that would be awesome.
And even if you don't want to be on the PMC, being a formal part of Vox while being a Puppet employee is welcome. I did it for years, and just knowing that somebody who is active in the community happens to also be an employee is incredibly helpful for when we need to get word back and forth to somebody. Because sometimes, as y'all know, just figuring out who the heck to talk to is challenging. And I don't mean anything bad by that. Like, there's just so many people doing so many different things, and from the outside, we have no idea who the right person is to talk to a lot of the time. Having some employees actively part of the community is very helpful for that. And it's also helpful for the company because y'all have the ability to help with module migrations, to help with merge requests, and all that good stuff, which now, even more so than in the past, is truly mutually beneficial.
If someone is interested in like a letter of recommendation, I think is the correct translation into English.
Mm-hmm.
We did those in the past to individual contributors. So if you're participating within Vox Pupuli and you would like a very, very nice written and signed paper from me, we did this in the past and we're happy to do this again. And also if you're part of the PMC and would like to have some proof on paper, for
Looks good on the
future
resume.
employees. Yes, absolutely. And we totally did this and are happy to do this again.
And then carrying on from that, we've got just a tiny bit more about that idea. What is going on with that? We've got a couple of different roles that we wanted to invite people to step up and help participate in. I mentioned earlier that we need to do a little bit better at onboarding now. So we're looking for a volunteer for somebody to help put together an onboarding guide and write it up and get that published. We're also looking for some people to help out with some other kind of more periphery things like social media or like coordinating blog posts or I don't know. I guess we're even doing press releases and stuff now. So it's like there are a lot more roles that aren't maybe as technical or as deep into the governance, but we need somebody to do. So if you are interested in any of those roles, come talk with us in IRC or the Slack channel or grab one of us before we leave today, because we want to talk with you. Like the onboarding is the one that I'm really, I really want to get that going right now. So if anybody wants to raise their hand and volunteer right now, it would be wonderful. I'll throw a box out for you.
One more to add on to that, it's anybody who does front-end web development. There's a lot of things that need prettifying. We suck as coders at making things look pretty. We need help.
Yes.
Please come help if you know this stuff. Or if you know anybody
Do
who
you know
knows this
Bootstrap?
stuff.
Do you know?
Perfect. You're hired. You got the job.
Hey!
Nice.
Always slightly short.
Cool. All right. And now let's move on to number one. Gene, you're back up again.
Yeah.
Let's talk Puppet files.
This one will be short. Lots that short. No, not on mine anyway. So I realized through a casual conversation just yesterday or the day before that not everybody knows that the Puppet file is just like a gem file or a rate file, and that it is a Ruby file. You could tack a .rb on it and it would do the same thing, except for the fact that Puppet wouldn't know what the hell that .rb was. But there are, though putting Ruby in your Puppet file is a horrific idea in general, because it's a great way to aim a cannon at your foot, there are some really, really good reasons or places where this can be very, very helpful for you. And at my company, y'all have probably heard me griping some this week about I am living through the Puppet 3 and 4 upgrade process again. Well, this ability to put Ruby in the Puppet file has been a godsend for that process. We have a 3 environment and a 4 environment, and we're working to move everything from one to the other so that we can then actually move to something current. But for anybody who's been around a long time, you know that getting off of 3 is a nightmare. For anybody who hasn't been around and lived through that once, be thankful that Puppet learned its lessons on what not to do on a major version upgrade and has never done it again. The reason there are companies like mine that are still own 3 is because that upgrade from 3 to 4 was so horrific. That all ties back to this in we have 2 environments. Running one Puppet environment's enough work. Having 2 completely independent environments with different stuff in them is even worse. By being able to put Ruby in our Puppet file, what we did is we have at the very top, just like you would in any Ruby file, require Puppet/version to require the version or the version part from the Puppet gem. Then we have a Ruby conditional in there that checks to see if Puppet version is 3 or 4. When R10K runs in our 3 environment, it gets a different set of modules for some things. It gets a different set of modules for some things for 4. And then down at the bottom, there's a set of modules that are the same in both.
Are you trying to make me cry?
Yes. The reason why that's actually really important, though, is aside from things like standard lib having different version numbers in both environments, and that makes me want to tear my eyes out, our 3 environment, until very recently, was 100% tied to SVN. Our 4 environment was 100% tied to Git. Now, we also didn't used to have RTK in our 3 environment, and that's a whole other nightmare. Now we're actually using RTK's ability to pull data from, or pull modules from SVN to lay down our data, our Hira data and cringeworthy, our EXT data for Puppet 3 as modules in that 3 section. But we don't need all that SVN crap on our 4 environments. And matter of fact, we don't have SVN installed on our 4 side because we're trying to get off of it. By being able to put Ruby in the Puppet file, I have 1 environment. And as we're trying to consolidate, that's one less thing I have to fight with. Unified testing, all of that. And it facilitates this moving forward a lot better. So though I don't recommend putting Ruby in your Puppet file in general, there are places where it can make your life easier and help you get to new stuff.
Can I just double check, you're still using EXT data?
Unfortunately, yes.
I'm sorry.
I heard that too.
Oh, well, since Ben was talking about me making him want to cry, guess what they did before I got there? For anybody who doesn't know, EXT data is what predated Hira. There's a reason why it doesn't exist anymore.
Well,
it came in the 2 days. Yeah. Well, EXT data, the function, doesn't exist in 4. But our Puppet code has that function scattered all over it. So there's a function in our 4 environment that implements EXT data and translates it to the Hira calls.
Huh?
That was my reaction as well. So yes, we are getting off of that. But the key thing is, I guess the last point I'll make on this is, Hira doesn't support data in the CSV format. Data in the CSV format was incredibly common in the EXT data days. And we have business processes and automations that generate that CSV data. And it's generated by scripts calling scripts, calling scripts, calling Python, calling scripts, calling scripts, calling Python, calling scripts. And some of them are nested twice as deep as what I just said. And it takes a long time to unwind that. And we're working on unwinding it, but this is how we can survive that and slowly get everything out of EXT data and into Hira data and from 3 all the way to 4 so that we can then do 5 and speed run to current.
So at what point do you just nuke it all and start over?
When you don't have 6,000 appliances sitting on customer sites.
Yep.
2025, you're still doing Puppet 3. Everything is deprecated since years. How do you do this?
You still use everything that was current when Puppet 3 was new.
So you have like 10 years old modules and never touched it again? What? Ever touched it again?
I'm not trying to make us cry, you're trying to give us nightmares.
But this isn't unusual though. Like, loads of people using Puppet are managing systems that are nobody wants to upgrade and won't be upgrading for ever and a day. Or they've been, getting rid of decommissioning them for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And we talk about it every 18 months.
The 3 to 4 upgrade really was that bad. I lived through it the first time when it was new. It really was that bad. When you don't have a dedicated Puppet team doing this, the SRE team I'm on here at my company is less than 2 years old. Prior to that, developers maintained their own infrastructure for 16 years. Developers were paid to write software, not to maintain Puppet environments. The 3 to 4 migration was a god-awful nightmare. Can you guess which one got prioritized? This is not unique to my company. I can't tell you the number of people I've talked to here who have talked about having 3 environments and some who still have 2.7 environments. In production today, there are hands up in 2 places, 3 places. Yeah.
I hate my life.
Yes. And they're running on operating systems just as old as those Puppet environments. And yes, I know those are insecure as hell.
Okay, so for the Puppet file, do we need, because we're talking about, wouldn't it be great if it wasn't doing Ruby and it was just like a YAML version or something. Is there a common use case where people need like a filter option, so based on an environment variable or something?
I think
so I know I've had a case where I'd be like, well, I want to install the core modules if I'm running at least Puppet version 6,
right.
and if I'm in CI. But
Yep.
if I'm like a regular Puppet server, I don't need them because the agents have already got them. But that could be boiled down to...
I think Ben nailed it, that we need to actually define a specification of the language for the Puppet file instead of it just being whatever you cram in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think Charlie talked about how there's all kinds of crazy things that customers do in their Puppet files.
I mean,
and we need to figure out how to accommodate those things in a way that doesn't require
accommodate everything.
Like, right.
If people are...
But I mean, like, the real and the common things that there's logical reasons to do.
Well,
I will point out really quick, that's a thing to take to the language steering committee in the short-term future. So we don't need to derail him right now. Sorry. What were you going to say?
No, I totally agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, we just need to accommodate the normal stuff. And
but this seems like a tooling problem also. If you had a way for RTK, let's say, to be able to select the Puppet file based on some criteria.
Right.
I don't like being that guy, but I am. But like we're looking at the future here. We're looking at sort of Puppet 8 and onwards. Wouldn't the right thing to do be to deprecate the old Puppet file? The new Puppet file is just data. And if you need to use Puppet 2 and 3 and 4 with this thing, then you're on your own. I mean, this isn't for you, right?
The key is how do we facilitate, as people finally get off those ancient versions, how do we facilitate the transition from the old to the new?
Yeah, I mean, you have a deprecation period where both of them...
Well, not just deprecation, but a usable, emphasis on usable migration path. And that's the key. As long as we do that stuff, absolutely. I'm all for dropping all that stuff because anything that we do for Puppet 8 isn't going to affect what I'm doing in my 4 environment.
Also, it's one really good point here is that R10K or G10K or whatever is not Puppet. So you could run brand new R10K on Puppet 2 or 3 or whatever. It's just you have to be careful about which I'm doing Ruby environments.
At all. I mean, I use it somewhere where it's
yeah, I mean, I'm I've been up there too long now. I mean, like, I'm using R10K on these ancient systems, but I'm using current R10K with a tiny patch to it. Because R10K assumes that your default branch is named trunk, and our default that your default environment is SVN trunk, and our default environment is not SVN trunk. It's the equivalent of it's called QA. And so I had to tweak that. But other than that, I'm using current R10K. I'm using the Go Webhook. Webhook Go from Vox. And so like that modern tooling helps me get off this old crap.
What about a tool that could read in your Puppet file and execute it and spit out the result as
I have one.
It's
called Puppet file result.
But then the new tooling.
Yeah, and like I said, that's all about making sure that we don't just kill things off. Because we've all seen that happen in this very ecosystem, that it's just dead. We have to give people a usable path forward. As long as we do that, you'll never hear me argue about any of it. I'll be standing there in line to champion doing it the better way.
I mean, the danger of killing some stuff off too aggressively is you lose possible contributors as well.
Exactly.
So whilst it's still working for you, there might be some features that you can still add back and join in with the community, whereas if you just go like, no, we don't want you on that version anymore, we will move on, then one more.
We all agree that like bringing the entire Puppet DSL into YAML is not what we want to do, but let's just imagine for a second that as a community we decided, F it, we're tired of this Ruby DSL, we're using the Puppet language DSL in YAML, and from Puppet 9 onwards, that's it. How many people would we alienate out of the community doing that? And that's the point that's being made right there.
That's still a conversation for the language. For the steering.
Well, I was just using it as a bad example.
But to counter your argument about how many contributors will be scared away, how many potential people will be scaring away by having to support ancient platforms that actually make life difficult as a contributor because, hey, I can't just add my shiny thing. I have to make my shiny thing work in.
Or by installing a remote code execution that is triggered by a PR.
Yeah.
Which is what the Puppet file is today.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, interrupting really quick, there has been an incident in Brussels that is affecting train travel. So there's been an evacuation, some stuff. So if you're planning on leaving lunchtime-ish, double check your travel times and everything. Make sure that you're not going to be affected by that.
That sounds no good.
It's not good, but
I understand from the news it's currently affecting certain metro stations. So I think the main train station's okay, but the metro station's affected.
okay, mostly metro stations. Robert, you want to do your containers?
Can we start the beamer again?
Yeah. You just hit the button.
Which button? Yeah, so many buttons. This button. Too easy.
The one that says no.
It'll take it a second to power on, but that cable should be all you need right there.
You may remember this talk or this presentation from last year. We have presented the Puppet server and Puppet B containers. Today I will do the same with the Open Vox server and Open Vox DB. Just spinning up a container and showing that it's working. That it is working. Signal. So
it's not only the metro, the South Station in Brussels is the first one. So if you're taking a train from Ghent to Brussels, the train probably can't even get into Brussels.
Or might
just
just like
go through, or might go
a very
through
live situation, so I wouldn't count on anything.
Yeah, but if it goes through, that's good news because the trains to Zaltend up to the airport and everything have to go through. But if you have to take the TGV or something to the south, you're stuck. Yeah, probably in trouble.
So back with any luck, it'll be taken care of by the time people are leaving. But I know a lot of people leave at lunch, so just check.
Yeah.
So everything all right with the trains?
Are things all right with the container?
I hope so. We have our Crafty repository, which has some examples. You may know it or know it not. This is it. It's not a Minecraft server. They have some examples which I prepared, like spinning up a minimal server, like only Open Vox server, just get it to work. Open Vox server and an Open Vox DB. And a standalone server if you don't want to spin up anything but an Open Vox server. And then the example I want to show today is the OSS. It's copied from the previous version, that's why it's called OSS. Where I spin up a server, a DB, a Puppet board, running an agent, and seeing the result in the Puppet board. There's also a little bit of a HDM installation in there, but I'm not showing this today because this is Martin's turn. No node factor. Not this one. Maybe I show the compose file. So we have a compose file. Is this readable?
Yeah.
So we have some servers in here, like at the moment it's called Puppet, but I'm trying to change this to OpenVox, where we use the OpenVox server image, which is hosted at the OpenVox project namespace on GitHub. It has some variables like that its host name is Puppet. I don't know if I can change it to OpenVox yet, because most of the Puppet agents and tools think there is something called Puppet in the DNS namespace, and so for the ease of use I have it at Puppet for now. Then I say where I want to have my data, and going next to OpenVoxDB, I say I want to have the image, and I'm exposing my ports, and then I have a Postgres 17, which has some database pre-installed for OpenVoxDB, a Puppet port, and down here there is a testing client also in the container which runs the things. So let's get started. Docker compose. So now we see that there is spinning up a database in OpenVoxDB and OpenVox server, and the Puppet board will fail every now and then until the servers are up and running. This will take some time. So now the certificates are created, CA is running, and now it's breaking all together. Oh, I think I have an error in the Ghent. I tested this before and now it's not working again. What do I do wrong? Encountered error.
Higher up, higher up. Keep going.
Higher. Fixing, execution, blah blah blah.
Space lane will be nice.
Yeah, no space then. The Docker problem, Docker on Mac. Then we need a little bit longer because I have to prove my system. Docker system prune as fuck. And then we try this again. But now I have to pull all the images. But so you can also see that I'm not faking the images, so I'm pulling in live from the internet now. And basically it's the same images like before, but now on the OpenVox namespace. And we plan to deprecate the old Puppet server and PuppetDB images, and then to archive the repositories so that they are available, but we don't do any changes anymore then. Does somebody know if I archive a repository, if the packages, the containers will still be up, or will they somehow vanish?
They will still stay available.
Stay available?
Yeah, I think they stay available.
Nice. So, come on internet, go. I have to switch to Alpine, smaller images. Yeah, well, because Alpine is smaller. At the moment I'm running on Ubuntu 24, and thanks to Nick we have packages for this one, and I can use 24 because for the old packages, for the Puppet server and PuppetDB, I relied on Ubuntu 22, and this was a CVE hell. Getting worse and worse, and you cannot patch anything. Looks better. Certificate from the OpenVoxDB, yes. Migration happening, yes. Yes, there is something available. This looks better. Let's go to the, no, this one. To Crafty, OpenVox, this, and so now the server and the DB is up and running, the Puppet board is also up and running. We have, do we see this? If I mark it, it's running, yes, this is running, and the Puppet server is also running. So I can do this. And now at start an agent. Just pull the image again, okay. There we go. It's a very live view today. Thanks to my phone, I have 5G. Yes. Just to show you, there's a fresh puppet board. There's nothing in there, no reports, no nothing, no notes. Just pulling has finished. And this is a bit slow. I'm using an not arm image on my arm, so it takes some time. But so you can see there's the fingerprint. It's requesting a certificate. Upper there you can see it's going in the certificate. We have to wait a little bit because doing no arm things on arm is very slow. There the certificates. Oh. Now it's breaking. Okay, this was not supposed to be.
Yeah, you don't have the Puppet DB terminus installed in the image. I was just trying it, ran into the same thing.
Yeah, I know this error, but I had it like 5 minutes before the stock. Ah, damn it. That's too live for me.
Yeah. Did you add to Puppet Core the fax terminus equals Puppet DB setting?
I hope so, because it worked before.
So, and this
but I
requires
changed nothing about the
package also on the Puppet server.
Yeah, maybe I have to test it a little bit better, because I somehow had a test environment which was working, then my space ran out, and then I proved everything, and now it's not working anymore. But I think you have seen, I have a Puppet board, I have a Puppet server, I have a Puppet DB, I have a compose file which spins up all the stuff, but on my H does not work so good at the moment. But if you want to do any cool things with containers and say, hey, open Vox containers are cool, I'm eager to work with you because I need people to talk with, because I think this is okay, but maybe it isn't. So if you have an opinion or some knowledge, I welcome you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Welcome everybody. People that know me know that I have weird ideas. The last time I had a weird idea, it was when we met Luke in Berlin, already a couple of years ago, as you might remember. And I asked him when we were in the evening at a bar, I asked him about, okay, when will you start deprecating the exec type and provider? And Luke just said, no, we can't. And I asked him, can you please provide a reason? You cannot deprecate exec type and provider. I can give you reasons why you should do it. And he considered for a while and came back after around about 10 minutes and said, Martin, it's an emergency exit. In case that nothing else is working, we still provide the users the possibility to run just any arbitrary command, whatever is required. Personally, this is okay, but when you open an emergency exit, what will happen? An alarm should show up, and within a couple of seconds you either have the police, the fire brigade, the ambulance next to you, and because you've done something the wrong way. At the moment you can use exec in any kind of pattern. And just do the curly break. My idea is now to bring to users the attention that this is not the way how you should use exec, because it's not idempotent itself. There are a couple of attributes that you can set. You can have creates, only if, and unless, or you just specify refresh only, so only run it once it is really required, so it gets triggered by another resource. My idea, there are two different ideas on how to tell people when they just use this setting with none of the idempotency attributes, that the user should receive a warning. For that, there are two different ideas. The first one, writing a lint plugin that checks if exec is using any one of these idempotency attributes. And the second one is, this is the question now they're putting up front, should we add this check also to the type? So when the type sees there aren't these settings, that it just logs some kind of warning at the Puppet server log? So is one already sufficient, or should we do both? This is what I'm now just putting up for a discussion to implement.
I would say both, and also print it on the client, because we don't have enough warnings on the client side.
Yep.
Because like 95% of the people writing Puppet code at our place don't have access to the logs from the Puppet server, and they should not have access to the Puppet servers. And like, I'm not allowed to give them access.
Yeah.
So the stuff that's only in the server log, well,
it's not helpful.
Nobody sees it, including the Puppet admins.
Well, yeah. Every now and then I get frustrated and sit down and like, okay, give me all the warnings, give me all the errors, and then I start nagging people. But it would be nice if Puppet could help me with the nagging.
Yeah.
Or even looking on a regular basis at the server logs unless you're having an issue.
Too much there.
There's a lot there. Even without the bug.
Yeah. But I think a linter would.
A linter is a great start.
Also would mean you don't need to update Puppets to get the advantage. Because it's a good idea, but I think a linter just drop it in whatever you want.
I love the idea of the linter, because then I can put CI checks against it and fix it in CI before it ever makes it onto the system.
Yep.
Yeah.
Should it be a warning or an error?
Oh. I would say because it's not against the language spec that it should be a warning.
Yeah, okay.
Because also in Puppet Lint you can choose to fail on warnings.
Okay.
But it's not against the specification, so until it is, I don't think it should be an error.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it's we need this escape hatch, but I think a more productive way is just Vox Pupuli. To be a proper Vox Pupuli module, it is strictly forbidden to use exec. That we need a provider that we need.
I don't know that that's a plausible path forward for a lot of things. There's a lot of places where exec really is needed.
Yeah, okay, but then it's even more a non-starter to try to get rid of it.
But I like the linter. And if the client told the people running the Puppet agent that, hey, please, this is not good, please, this is unsafe, etc.
My last linter plugin is a couple of years ago. I still try to recapture that, and I can start working on it.
The one thing I would say, if there's a Puppet client-side output, is much like you can have a lint ignore.
Yeah.
We need a way to selectively, not globally, turn off the please don't do this for a given exec for the ones where we actually need it.
That's what we have, but that's what Eric, you're talking now about doing this check in the type.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I will point a different approach here that we have already implemented and we haven't publicized as much as we probably should have. Who all is familiar with the idea of a parameterized system call? Okay, so the difference is here, this is a string. And if you do variables, you can do like a variable that evaluates to semicolon RMRF no preserve root, right? That's a classic shell exec problem. So what we can do now is a parameterized call, which turns it into an array, which is that and that and that all get constructed by the shell when it runs, and it limits a lot of bullshit. Like a lot of fork bombs, for example, don't work with this. And when you pass in an array, if you pass in a variable, so that variable that expands to semicolon RMRF whatever, that is a single parameter rather than being, hey batch, here's a string, evaluate it as you will. So this already exists, and I highly encourage all of you to start using this as much as you possibly can rather than using strings.
That landed in like 6.23 if I recall. Because I
But
remember.
we didn't document it
Maybe
for
that's
like
the selective
2 years.
turnoff method that I was thinking about is you use the parameterized one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and
but-
the runtime thing doesn't scream about the parameterized one.
Yeah, but so that doesn't fix this problem here.
But honestly, when we have some new nice feature like that, please a linter to tell people that there is a new improved way, and that the link to
Lucas,
be able to add.
Didn't you write this linter, check?
I think it was great gambling.
Okay.
But also to selectively make linter warnings errors.
Yeah.
Currently it's global. I have some linter warnings that I would like to be errors, but not all warnings.
Yes.
And because sometimes I'm getting to the point of, okay, we have cleaned up the code base enough, there is just a few left of these. Okay, error time. Like, hit them hard. But until then, before that, I need to be more gentle in my communication with people.
Yes.
Charlie?
Yeah, so I was just gonna say to your point, Ben, about sleep, 5 million being a problem, exec has a timeout parameter.
That is just an unusual example. It's just a generic approach.
Right,
to not have
I'm
any-
saying recently, fairly recent change, maybe within a year or two, the timeout parameter now has a default of 5 minutes. So it's something to keep in mind if we do have an exec that it takes a backup, it installs something, it runs for a while, you may need to set a larger timeout than things.
So I think a bigger problem that encapsulates all these things is that we don't have a docs page that says, hey, here's how you can safely use an exec. And I think that's something that we need to work on. And also I really like this idea that you're talking about.
And just the docs for like all the built-in types and functions, like where the docs for exec and file and stuff like that are.
Yeah.
Having those enhanced to have what you were just talking about would be key, because those are the docs that get looked at.
Honestly, I want to deprecate the ability to run a string exec, but that's a bigger question.
I don't think you can, Ben.
I know.
Bin sh-c, next parameter is everything I want to exec as a string.
Which is fine, but you have to intentionally shoot yourself.
What about a lint plugin that sees how many execs you've used in a manifest? Because that's a common anti-pattern that beginners would make. They end up writing
Itemized module.
My itemized tool will do that. It'll tell you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yep. It's Puppet 6 only. He hasn't upgraded Puppet 7 and updated. It's moving to 7 maximum. I've been nagging him about it for years.
Now I have time to do it, so hey.
Excellent.
Itemized, right?
So, you get nice candy when it's done.
Oh, you're holding out.
Yes.
Alright.
Quick derailment, but I hope it will be quick. Parameter is a way of defining the exec command as an array of strings. According to the documentation, it's not supported on Windows.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that is something that felt painfully because I had to
For the rest, I don't know whether you have heard it. Harold was pointing out that the array syntax within the exec command is not supported on Windows.
That's something that we could probably fix, though.
Would be welcome.
It would be
I'm not saying that I've got the time to do it, because I don't, but for a programmer who works with Windows,
so
I'm not volunteering Nick either.
Oh, I just did. That's okay.
Yeah, but I can see that being something that a Windows developer could probably fix in a reasonable amount of time.
So a little update on that. I think that it doesn't work on the default CMD Windows, but I'm pretty sure it does work on PowerShell. And to be honest, we could hack it to concatenate a string and still make it work. You just wouldn't get the security.
It could be
But we'll fix it.
It could be an approach to just say, okay, CMD is CMD, but people should really
Please upgrade.
PowerShell provider.
Yeah, well, I mean, like,
current decade.
When I was doing presentations about Puppet on Windows years ago for Puppet, we were telling people to use PowerShell, even though it's not the default. So, and you know, maybe one of those major version breaking changes to put in potentially a warning in 9 and actually do live in 10 is to switch the default to PowerShell.
Yep.
You're in front of the camera, kids, wait.
That would be nice.
So, David, there's one for your list. In 9, put a deprecation for CMD being the default to its exec.
Okay.
And in 10, switch the default to its exec PowerShell.
All right, let's go ahead and move on. Does anybody in here not know who Ari Kanar is?
I've never met him before today.
M Collective or Korea?
Or
Hyra,
Concat.
or Concat.
Catalog.
The original Concat, not the updated.
Yeah, so there was at least one hand that went up in the back, so we should just assume no.
Catalog those.
This guy is the brilliant mind behind Hyra to begin with. So he's built a ton of things, and he's been in the community since day one, and like has helped us like through many iterations of building better tools. And I don't know what he's about to talk about, but I'm really interested and curious.
My laptop had a bit much coffee, so the sport seems to be working now, but let's see if it's gonna last. So I want to talk about a thing for scheduling Puppet runs. Martin had a talk about hundreds of thousands of nodes of Puppet, and we all know the trick of scheduling Puppet with FQD and RAM to spread out the runs so you don't kill the Puppet master. So that works. I mean, it works alright, but it's not like a strict scheduling, and you don't really know when your runs are gonna happen. And so I'll show a thing to look at improving that. At the same time, I like Puppet Apply as a way of running Puppet in some cases. Sometimes I use Agents, so this will work for both. It's something I worked for myself last year. I haven't open sourced it on Mike. Now that there seems to be a resurgence in community interest, so we will see. So, simple Puppet control. I can do, I can ask it to find the nodes that's managed by the software, and what it does is at the half an hour intervals of the hour, it will trigger all the Puppet runs, all of them, how many error machines you have. But they will wait until there's a waiting list of a slot of 10 concurrent or 100 concurrent or 1,000 concurrent, how many ever you specify, and they will compete for a slot in that 1,000, and they will get their slot, they will run, and they will evict from the slot, and the next one will enter the slot. So they will run as near as possible to the hour or the half an hour, as quick as you can, and at the limit that your Puppet server is set to allow, and no more. So if I were to do trigger over here, I will just clear the screen on the side, that'll go off and trigger them all. Well, let me see, go off info. And what we see there is there's a capacity of 10, and right now those machines they have a lead. So I can drop this at runtime down to 5 or 100 or whatever I want. If I bring it down to 5, then the ones that's currently running will finish. But further on, only 5 will continue to run. If I move it up to 1,000 will be allowed again. So you have full control over how often they run, and every single run will do this trick where it tries to schedule and try to be as efficient as possible against the Puppet master. While doing that, it will emit metrics. Let me see what fresh horrors I'm about to show on my screen. So, do I have this up here somewhere? There we go. So I got this is a different environment, but I got the nodes. You can see how long they run, how many how long fax generation took, how long it took to apply the code, config retrieval, all that kind of stuff. This is the stuff that's in the last run summary, but the scheduler will just expose that to Prometheus as a side effect. It also monitors Puppet, so if you have failing resources or if it hasn't run for a day or whatever you like, it will send it'll make metrics in Prometheus and you can alert on that. We can do
way
things
nicer than having to instrument that in some of the other ways.
Yeah, it's all included in the one thing. I can do things like, so if I do that, they will all go into a maintenance mode. What it means is the scheduling will stop. The machine will just not run Puppet at this point forwards, but Puppet is not disabled. So if you were to SSH onto the machine, you can still run Puppet apply, you can still do your thing, you can run Puppet agent or whatever mode you use, but the scheduling will stop. That's important because what I haven't shown is it, in the case of a Puppet apply based deploy, it also manages the code. And so if I go, I can go bundle up this code that I have here. It's a normal Puppet checkout. It will checksum every file inside the Puppet code. It will make a tar file. It will checksum the char file. And when I do release that, I'll give it the name and the two checksums that I printed out, and I can automate that. And it will update a network key value store. The key value store tells the entire network do this, and they will check out the code. But also every minute, if I were to just go and edit this file, well, that's the wrong file, and put some bad stuff in there, within a minute it will have undone that. It will take the code away and redeploy the code. So this is a full end-to-end management. It manages the code checkouts, it manages scheduling for both apply and agent. Of course, agent wouldn't have to go check out new nodes. Monitoring, all that kind of stuff.
On the code checkout part, what all would it replace that we're used to using? Like, would it replace R10K? Would it replace code manager?
You give it a tarball, so you still have to make all of that stuff, however you're making it. I don't want to get involved in that.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understood what you meant by the checkout part.
Yeah, no. It's literally that you give it. I can show you.
You're basically handing in a module builder.
Yes. So what I give it is a path to go fetch a tarball from. The checksum of the tarball, and the checksum of the SHA-sums inside the tarball.
Okay.
And so every minute it will verify the SHA-sums of all of the files on the box are the same, and that the SHA files hasn't been modified, and that the archive hasn't been modified. If any of these things change, it will redeploy. And if you look at the file that I modified, you'll see it's been remediated.
Can you filter the nodes based on, I don't know, query?
It's core, so all of the stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So all of the things.
Can you show a bit the contents of these fragments of code? So an idea of what you have, the content of the code basically.
It's your Puppet directory.
Is the environment? You say?
Yeah. It's your Puppet directory. Yeah. All your code. So if you're using apply, of course, the node needs to have the code.
Exactly.
If you're not using apply, well, don't do the code stuff. Just schedule your own.
Okay.
Then you use a Puppet set.
When you use apply, you apply these fragments of things in Puppet, which is basically a Puppet environment.
It's a normal Puppet environment. Yeah.
It's just masterless Puppet.
Both of G10K, all the normal stuff.
Puppet environment.
Yeah, nothing fancy there. So that's it. I mean, I can make that a little bit more generally consumable or whatever if there's interest on that.
Yes, definitely interest.
Cool. The other thing what I've been demonstrating without talking about it, and I'll try to be quick, is the little command line that I'm using here. It's a proof of concept of my command line, so it's not like I just quickly iterate around it, but that command line is built dynamically from YAML file. So it's a zero code or low code CI management framework. It's called App Builder. If you search for Core App Builder, you'll see it. It's aimed at, if you have a bunch of Bash scripts and shell scripts and Ruby scripts, and they all have different CLI parsing and different ways of doing things. You know, you can. Oops, let me see. Unroll. App Builder. So App Builder. If you go to github.com/Gloria/App Builder, you'll find it. And there's a little intro video of it. Really nice for just wrapping your admin tools, your kubectl with 500 lines of bullshit in a nice little UI that you can put in your wiki, but then you maintain the YAML file and it's always correct. That's all I got.
Nice. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, we've gone through all of them, but pretty close. So what we're going to do here is transition. David's going to close out the morning, talking about community a little bit, take some questions and everything. If you have questions about the like intersect with Vox as well, myself, Tim, Nick, anybody who's been who's working on this, we're all here and we can help answer those questions. So don't hesitate to step into those. And then after that, we'll go to lunch. When we come back, the schedule says that that's the Vox working group. We'll come back in here for just a few minutes. We'll do these two lightning talks, and then we're going to talk very briefly about the language steering committee, because basically all we have to do at this point is just kind of like, hey, here's a proposal. Is everybody cool with it? Let's like make this happen. And then Gene's going to talk for just a few minutes about where we are with our security response team, which unfortunately we're still really early in developing. So it's probably just going to be a few minutes of like, hey, here's the status. And then we'll break out into the other room. So when you come back from lunch, come here first.
Cool. Sorry, I'm obviously fumbling about. This laptop has a delightfully short battery. There we go. Since some things have already been covered, I may whiz through the slides, so I'm definitely not going to slowly go through 14 slides. Not sure. Was I? Not sure. Again. Cool. Thank you. Right. So we've already done those kind of introductions. So I guess the thing that I kind of want to take on was this great Terry Pratchett quote. You know, we do all wish we could have changed the past, but I think right now it's kind of about setting how we partner and how we kind of work forward, so that it becomes something we all want. Because I think we all know there's definitely been issues, there's definitely been problems with ways of working, but I think that's ultimately what we want to most get out of this. You know, out of today and out of what comes in the future is how we work well together. So it is actually the way we always wanted to work. So the simple summary of the changes, just again to give it, is the current binaries will remain in place in their download locations. They will not be updated now. As the February release comes out, that will come out in the EULA location. So essentially those binaries are there from October. The PDK is not covered in that, so PDK will continue to be public, but things like Puppet, PuppetDB, Bolt are all private, so we'll go to the private binary location.
PDK depends on Puppet, doesn't it?
What's that?
PDK has Puppet inside.
Yes.
How's that?
That is not fully worked out yet.
Okay.
So in terms of those public repos, you know, the current Puppet Labs repos, they are remaining in place. Some have been archived, like Puppet Agent, but the PuppetDB, Puppet, and so on are remaining open and public. With the Apache license, critical CVs 9+ will be fixed. I know Alex kind of mentioned, is that the right level of CV? And I'm open to, you know, take back, you know, suggestions about what that should be. There has been discussions about public pull request process to support community users who are needing that code base, but I don't have any details of that. Again, I'll take feedback of things that are needed. And you know, we've already been talking about Puppet 9, working with Standard Steering Committee to kind of establish, you know, what should we go to Puppet 9 and how we should be working on it. That's the very high up level. Is there any questions I'm missing there? Yeah.
You mentioned that the source code will remain up there, but like if the source code's not available, like going forward, how are people going to submit requests?
Because it's submit request to basically Puppet Core and PE, is that?
Yeah, I mean, well, it says pull request to support community users.
Yeah.
I understand pull requests are maybe folks that are paying for access, but like how will pull requests work for that?
Yeah, I honestly don't have that answer right now. I know that internally they're working the process, and that that's something we kind of be interested in feedback if there's any models people have already used in these kind of situations, or suggestions they have, we definitely want to know.
I think some of that might come back to how all the repositories interact with each other too.
Yes.
But the answer might simply be contribute to OpenVox and have that cherry picked in to the, from our perspective, what is effectively the downstream closed distribution now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But that's all TBD, of course.
No, yeah, exactly.
But that might be a viable path forward for everybody.
Yeah. And just, I kind of just want to highlight, because we did do the kind of podcast on Alessandro's abnormal DevOps situations, but just, just to kind of discuss that out in terms of the initial fears around trademark rules. So, in terms of how the fork happened, the community we talked about were wanting the autonomy without Perforce owning the top level Puppet labs. Perforce, so, legal console's view was we could not legally give rights to a community group, transfer the repos into a different location without kind of losing control of our trademark. But we were then kind of working quite heavily to make sure in terms of functional usage that we could definitely kind of give a strong statement that CLI, libraries, file locations, all that kind of thing would not force, name changes, so nobody needed to go through all the code and remove valid Puppet or Puppet binary or anything like that. Although, Ben will probably say, there will be looking at for the OpenVox project in terms of introducing, different names for binaries and things, but having a kind of concat layer, not concat,
compatibility.
Compat, thank you. To kind of have that compatibility there so it still works. So again, another Terry Patrick wrote. So this is kind of what I kind of hope for it, is that the whole problem was Perforce ultimately for a long time was choosing exactly what to build and kind of keeping it as something that people just had to use. And I think as we kind of come into this partnership, it will allow us to kind of all work together and kind of all build what we actually need. And one thing that hasn't been said out of this, the trusted contributors, I'm currently working with our security team to find out what's technically possible, and also to kind of get a security standard written to say who can and should be a trusted contributor, because I know there's requests in, and I know it's frozen. So I'm working on that right now. For our internal staff, we want to have clear standards about how code's contributed. With the kind of mention of could Dana work on the Vox pages. I want that to be crystal clear, so it's clear. So employees don't have to kind of go through an approval process, and it takes ages for anyone to get anything, and it doesn't actually feel worthwhile. So I kind of want that to be clear. There's also going to be EULA developer access with the 6-weekly build for Puppet Core. If you ask me for any more details beyond what is the EULA and what is that access, I don't have that just now, but just to kind of give you that headline. Yes?
When can we expect information about the EULA? Like, it was announced like in October or November, and it's very, very frustrating for the community that we're still unclear, like, if you are able to test or keep testing on the packages that you provide or not.
Yeah. I will message Zika because we are about to come into their time zone. So I'll ask that in the lunch break.
The two things that came up on that before were, before it's finalized, can Perforce share the draft so that we can give feedback before it's too late to do anything about it?
Yeah.
Clearly a big draft. And the other is, even Red Hat allows for CI usage without having to go through all kinds of CI and Microsoft, or Red Hat and Microsoft both allow for CI usage.
Yeah.
And so can there be something included about that in the EULA so that we can run tests without having to sign EULAs?
Yeah, but we definitely need to do that back.
Yeah.
I'm aware I'm about to eat into your lunch, so I'm going to go through the rest relatively quickly because a lot of this is going to be covered. So this slide very much from what I was just looking with Ben is going to have very similar kind of views of what does the standard steering group like in terms of OpenBox, Perforce, user group. I've missed partners out on that. I was trying to edit it in there but being incompetent. I've mentioned trusted contributors. I want to get all our code projects to have a clear indication of ownership, so you know who to contact, maintenance and life cycle schedules, and where we are saying we're accepting PRs, we have a regular triage and review the PRs. Because I know there's nothing more painful than raising PR. Yes, Tim.
Do you have a rough timeline?
Within this quarter.
Okay, oh, that's nice.
Within this quarter, like by the end of March, or are you
yes.
talking about? Okay.
Yes. Community events. I put up that little thing that is just a Microsoft form with the picture there. We kind of want to work out what events you want to see us at. Obviously events like this, but is there things in the States? Is there things in APAC? Is there more local, community groups we can help with? Because that's what we're looking to do, is to have more presence, have more of our speakers, and not just be me going out, but hopefully more engineering staff and others. To give some timelines, the thing we want to kind of do is, confirm that alignment and standard steering group process. Look to kind of have out in quarter 2, an actual event calendar so that we're very clear where we're going to be and make it easier to plan. Ultimately, I'm putting quarter 3 there roughly in terms of us coming back with the steering committee more to work on things, and a whole revisiting the education and advocates program.
This be Q4, or is that a typo?
Hey, trouble on design. So the design team edited this and managed to change that to quarter 2. So that should be quarter 4 at the end.
It should be 4, yes.
Was that? It should be 4. Should be 4. I'm just going to skip through my nice quotes. That's just talking about being cooperative. But ultimately, we want to move to partnership with unanimous decisions, reform our code maintenance, and plan collaborative events for the community. So yeah, that's the usual thing where you can get my contacts and links. But yeah, that's my very quick version. Is there any questions? I'm holding you back from lunch. You're obviously free to grab me for conversations at any point as well. One thing I'm going to ask is just at the end of lunch, if lunch runs from 12 to 1, if anybody wants to be a group photo, we'll do it in front of the kind of big config management camp sign at the entrance, because I definitely want to replace the GitHub image, which I'm pretty sure has no current Puppet staff.
That is true.
So yeah.
So fun.
So everyone's welcome, by the way. So what a nice Puppet and community image.
Okay.